once I unmute my microphone. Hello, and welcome to the second live episode of What Makes This Layout Great. We are back at the Kootenay Lake Navigation Company. I'm told maybe Kootenay isn't right. It might be Kootenay? So we'll go with Kootenay this time if I can remember to pronounce it that way. But so happy to have you join us today. If you haven't seen part one or kind of skimmed through it at the least, I'll give you a little bit of background into what we're looking at here and what we're going to be accomplishing today. So, the Kootenay Lake Navigation Company is a 3x6 foot N scale layout designed in 5 compact track plans. And there's a PDF. I believe it's linked in the description of this video. If not, it's certainly linked in the description of part 1. It is a continuous loop run, but very much operations are in the forefront. It is based on the Canadian Pacific's Kootenay Lake barge operations and the Caslo sub. Basically, the train would be barged from one location to this isolated subdivision of Canadian Pacific. And it's great to have barges as a means of getting your cars on and off a layout and have a built-in staging, especially if you don't have a lot of room. So last time we did this, we were on this side of the layout, the town side of Lardo, and I'll bring up the layer that shows us the track plan, and we'll unlock that so we can actually see it layered on top a little bit better. Okay, so we were on the Lardo side here, and today we're going to be focusing on Gerard, which gets into some of my favorite elements with regards to route building. We've got a lot of scenery, a lot of greenery going on. We're going to be playing with some rock walls and building up this log loading facility here, along with a nice little scenic lake. So that should be a we'll see how long that takes. I'm anticipating this stream will last for about 3 hours. Hopefully we'll get the layout done in that time frame. Maybe more, maybe less, but hopefully get in that time frame. And at the very least, even if we don't get it done, we'll play with it a little bit at the end. So if you guys have any questions while I'm doing this, feel free to type them in the chat window to the side, whether it's this, I think it's this side. But you'll know, you're on your browser or your phone. Feel free to type any comments, questions, anything you wish to contribute to the sake of conversation, but we will get to it. So, and we might end up doing a little bit more detailing on this side, but I mainly want to focus on the Gerard side here with this logging camp. I think that's going to be particularly fun. Today I managed to connect my Nintendo Switch Pro controller to the PC. Works with trains, consumer. Well, yeah, great to have controllers with this. Actually, if when I'm running tonight, I've got my rail driver hooked up, and it's so nice to work the DCC mode with that. All right, so with this side, let's see what we've got going on here and figure out how we're gonna take it. So I'm gonna raise this up a little bit just to kind of use it as our template. So we've got all the tracks in place. By their design, they've got some road to the logging area coming off probably in this neighborhood over here, so that's where we'll have that. I've added, they just have the crane as the one building listed there. I've added an office. We may end up moving that to the other side so that we can put some trucks or something parked closely to that. And then Trout Lake, which will be a nice easy water feature. So, what do I feel... hello, Nate's Trains. Glad you could join us. What do I feel like starting with today? Well, good rule of thumb to start with forming the geography. Now, this dotted line suggests that they have intended some kind of hill here. The key's going to be to fit the logging road and the trucks in as well. So I think what we'll do, I like the idea of having the hill because it gives a little bit of separation between the lake and the log loading facility, and I think that's worth playing up Because honestly, as I talked last week, a layout this small, you don't necessarily have a lot of scenes to work with or a lot of space for a lot of scenes. So having those small scenic dividers that you can put in place that help you to make that's definitely not what I intended to do. That help you to make a large area seem like a bunch of smaller scenes, and by virtue, then those small scenes feel large in comparison. I am too distracted by how handsome you are. Hi, Bethany. She's allowed to say that. She's my wife. So just a little hill like this. Nothing super tall. I mean, you could go crazy and you could just do a whole scene divider here, but I don't think that would make the most sense. Hypothetically, you could even cut a hole in and divide up the tracks, but given that it's a whole runaround, putting a hill there would block turnouts. Yeah, I wouldn't want to put a large hill at the least. Now, I'm going to maybe cheat a little bit by putting trees where you'd probably want to keep it clear and have your switches, your access for your switches. But then again, if you're doing remote turnouts or some sort of piano wire under your bench work, then you don't need hand access to this switch anyway. We'll keep this one open. This one and the one on the other side aren't going to be issues. This is going to be pretty simple here. We're just going to lower the terrain a bit. We're just going to lower this as a guide, and then we'll get it to fit. And I think we're just going to... We could do this as having like a sharp embankment, as if the lake went all the way up to the edge of this. Because thinking about how the railroad would have been built in real life, either the lake probably went right up against the mountains. So either the railroad put an embankment into the lake, or they carved into the land. We're going to treat it like they carved into the land. So that gives us a rough template of where our lake's going to go. Basically, it's just going to fill this whole area here, right to about our hill. And then we'll have a lot of fun texturing the edge of the track. I think that's going to make it a nice... really mixing your terrain textures, whether you're doing it in a sim as I am here, or whether you're mixing your dirts and your scenery material when you're building an actual physical layout, just gives it so much vibrancy and character. I think that's going to be enough of a hill. I'm tempted to play with it more, but I don't want to overdo it. We can tweak that more if necessary later. Looking at our guide, we are... Okay, so we're going to have a logging road. I'm thinking it makes the most sense to have the logging road come in at this angle. I might move this down. Let's see if I like that arrangement better, where we've got the... Whoop. Nope, that's throwing out the base maps. We're going to lock that into place. So if we move... the crane more down to here. Looks like they add another hill on this side here. We're not going to be able to do that with the way that this structure is located, but honestly, I mean, it would be nice to have a hill in that corner. That'd be probably the ideal, but the trade-off is if we have a log pile, you still have that sense of a complete corner, and that's what we're going to do with this guy here. We've got the trailer here. How do we want to structure it? I mean, so many different ways we could go about it. I kind of like it like this, because then it in and of itself is kind of a scenic divider. Now, yeah, it gives you very little space if you were thinking practically, while your trucks don't have much room to get by there. But if you treat it like the trucks would get into unload, probably off layout, I think that's a fine compromise. I mean, yes, of course, we're in a sim. We could cheat. We could just extend the landscape, but we're trying to adhere to the prototype. We're trying to keep it in that 3x6 grid. How long should a railroad barge be for a model railroad? Good question, Dylan. And the answer is basically, as long as you want it to be. I mean, that seems like a little bit of uh, a cop-out answer, but the reality is railroad barges came in all sorts of sizes when you look at prototypes, whether you're looking at barges that worked on the Slocan Lake, which were shorter, or you look at some of the New York City barges, you might have operations where one tug is hauling 2 barges at the same time. So it really depends on how many cars you want to ferry on and off the layout at any given time. This, given how small our sidings are and how little room we have to move track around, making a huge barge doesn't make sense because there's not a lot of room to play with anyway. But if you've got more room, you might want to make a larger barge. It really depends on kind of what your goals are with how much car flow you're having in and out. The reality is you could even treat it, so if you were limited by space like we are here, you could just treat it as maybe there's multiple, especially if you were doing a city, maybe multiple barges come in a single day. So you've got some cars that come in, go out, and then another batch that comes in and goes out. Prototype 150, 250. That's also a good answer. As I say, I'm really basing this barge length just off of the physical space we've got. So we're going to have a logging road come in. We're going to use a spline asset for this, I think, just because it adds a little bit of accent. So we search for dirt roads, and then we'll segue it into just terrain textures. Even if we don't end up keeping the road, it'll give us something to start off of. So we've got this road coming in, and then probably around here is where it starts to essentially disappear into a general gravel lot, like right about that. How else do we want to structure things on the terrain front? Because I'm tempted to get into this. I do want to get into that, but I also want to finish off landscaping. Let's finish off our landscaping first before we get it too much into this scene. Hey, Railroad Guy, thanks for joining. Hey, Squiggy. So I want to do some rock wall stuff. I think that would be fun. Rock walls, I mean, it's a great way if you have a very narrow space to create a hill. It's fantastic as far as being able to minimize that gap between your track and your backdrop. And that's kind of what we're facing here. I mean, we do have a bit of a hill, but I feel like this would be just a nice scene right along this edge in particular. I'm thinking probably this bit will make rock wall. So to do that, we've got a couple of different ways of doing that. First are splines. These Zute, of these names, they're such interesting names. I love these Zute cliffs. They are seasonal in the simulator, which means you change it to winter and you now have snow on them. You can kind of see how it's flashing back and forth when I move it. It gives you a sense. But we're just using them because they look cool. For starters, we'll mix in some random rocks because obviously you use too much of this and you start to see the pattern of it, and then it loses that random effect that you want. We're gonna need to lower this more because obviously, well, or actually I think I have a different version that has I have to lay these out because different ones have different textures. They also have different shapes around the edge. That might be more like what we need. I'm looking for basically the flattest top I could get. See, that's going to be way too tall. There's times you want angles like that and times you want really just steep, and we're going for really steep here. Hey Casey, glad you could join in. Now this, I think this might be what we're going for here. I like, because it's got that nice sharp edge right next to the track, and then it cuts off. So we're going to place this one. And I like the kind of grass rock mixture of it. Let's make sure we're on the right layer. So now I just need to delete that. And we'll get this placed in here. And then this will be kind of a base we work off of. We're going to add more random rocks as we go. But this just gives us an initial starting point. So we have that as sort of the initial layer. See, even there, it's got this steep hill, so it's a little tricky to get it to kind of behave right, and we obviously don't want it appearing on the other side, which might rule this one out. Cool as it is, it's gonna just stick through to the other side, so we can't do that one. I mean, this one's smaller, but it won't stick through the other side, so we'll use this. We'll go with this. Because again, we're not solely reliant on just this one. We're going to be adding some rocks and some other things. But I think just, especially to kind of hide this transition between the slope, just to use this to go as close to the tracks as we dare. That's going to have a nice edge to it. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, and there's that bumpy track where everybody was like, oh, run your train over that last week, and that was amusing to see. We're going to be fixing that in a moment. Once we're, well, we don't even have to be done with landscaping, but one thing at a time. Just our heights to get everything to kind of fit and make sure that they don't change on us once we put that in. I like that. I don't know what you guys think, but I like that. And then we're going to lower this a bit. So, I love the face. I love this face right here. Now, yeah, it has this kind of weird tear effect. So now we're going to play around with the landscape a little bit more to try to get it to behave. One of the things I wish Train Z allowed you to do is you can't really see. You could do an invisible mode to see through your landscape, but it will not allow you to see through objects. That's kind of awkward, but I think we can make this work as is. We're basically just going to really raise up the terrain height to get close to that rock wall here. We might end up lowering the terrain on top, but for now we're just trying to get the face of it right, and then we'll flatten the terrain back around the tracks, and we'll figure out how high we're actually going for along the mountain's edge, because we do want it to feel very mountainous. We want that. Yeah, and then turn up the sensitivity down, decrease the radius, and we're just gonna take everything back to, well, not everything, but we're gonna take what's next to the tracks back down to 0. Yeah, I like that. Gives you a nice, I mean, obviously if you were building this as a physical layout, you're not usually going to be looking from this angle unless you're leaning over your table. Short snow shed. Well, I like that idea. I like that idea. So the plan doesn't call for one, but that's a good idea because we could put it. So right here, we're kind of just having small hills, but the advantage with the snow shed is that we could put our scenic divider, which doesn't exist yet, but our sky divider could then go over the snow shed, and it won't be noticeable. And I do like that. So I like that suggestion. We will do that once we're done with the rocks. Good idea, Dylan. And really, we have to keep it to just here because we want to keep this switch accessible. I want to keep that open anyway. But yeah, no. This is why I like building with you guys. You guys have some good ideas and input. Oh, no, definitely don't want to do that. I'm just sculpting a little bit more around here. I like that elevation, though. I mean, it feels nice and visually imposing. So I think we're going to keep those elevations pretty much as they are. So I have been working on editing. Tomorrow, for those of you who are on Patreon, you will get first access to the next edited episode of What Makes This Layout Great, and that's going to be the Lake Erie, Franklin, and Clarion layout designed by Dan Burke. We, from Appalachian... I always forget if it's Appalachian Railroad Modeling or Appalachian Model Railroading. But if you Google search Lake Erie, Franklin, Clarion, Appalachian, you'll see it. It'll be linked in the description. But really cool double-decker layout near where I used to live in northwestern Pennsylvania. 20-mile coal hauler. Real line. He's compressed the entire thing into a bedroom size layout. Large bedroom size layout. So we reviewed that. So if you want to get early access to that, go to patreon.com/theroundhouse. And for as little as $5 a month, you get early access to episodes of both What Makes This Layout Great and the Roundhouse podcast. A 2-for-1 deal. So patreon.com/theroundhouse, and there's all sorts of other tiers and perks there. You should totally check it out. And I really appreciate all the support that you guys lend. Just checking in on your comments. Okay. Now we're going to add some random rocks. So if we search rock, if we spell rock correctly and we search rock, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some of them are smaller like this guy, which those are useful to have because then you can place them towards the edge. And it breaks up the pattern a little bit. Oftentimes the key with anything digital is to make it look analog, and that's no exception here. We're taking these patterned elements and trying to make them seem random. I actually really like how those two go together, color-wise. So now we've got some nice dimension to it. Ooh. I don't know that it would curve over like that, but it looks imposing. So I think we're going to keep that there. But we'll bury it a little bit so it's not quite as obvious. Yeah. And another one back here. And just this kind of layering effect. And it's true, even if you're doing model railroading and you're using plastic molds, there's still this idea that you want, if you're using plastic molds and you kind of have these set shapes, how do you break them and how do you randomize them so it doesn't look like you have the same repeated rock pattern over and over? This is what I'm looking at. One of the big challenges, and I may have mentioned this last week, when building in this sim is trying to get really steep angles to work. Not proving to be too much of a challenge with this build. I'm sure it will come up in others, especially so if we were trying to build a track, like let's say we're building a switchback and it ran right next to this line here along this edge, trying to get it to behave properly, which is to say getting the landscape to fit both the elevated track, because you've got these fixed points to work off of. And so, there's a little bit of distance between this edge and this edge. One of the interesting challenges of working in this sim. And I feel like, yeah, we're going to want some along here. We're going to kind of bury them a bit. We do have some texture tricks we can employ as well for getting nice rock textures. I don't want to... See, that's a that overhang is really nice, but really want to save it for just this little edge here. So tell me about yourselves. Tell me a little bit about some of the projects you have going on layout-wise, how your layouts are going in the comments if you're joining along with us live. I'm really curious to know more about sort of what your modeling tastes are, what your goals are, what you'd like to see out of this show. I'm very open to feedback because it's a new thing for all of us, and I'm curious to explore that with you. That's looking pretty good. I feel like this is still maybe a bit blank, so we're gonna add a bit more here. These are a bit round, but that's okay. Let's add some other. Too late. Let's see what other key with rocks is always different artists use different shades of color. So once you commit to one, you're kind of committing to that specific artist's rock colors. My railroad guy, my layout has kind of stayed the same. I hope to finish my narrow gauge line and buy some stock for it. What kind of narrow gauge? ON30, HON3? Ooh, that's a nice... I like that one. Yeah. Details. Yeah, that's nice. I mean, it's slightly a different shade from these other ones is the only downside of it, but I love how it's got the moss and stuff with it. Oh, this is one of my Rico's. You'll remember from last week, Rico made for us, specific to this plan, this Mountain Lumber Company building, the grain elevator in the backdrop here is his creation, so I shouldn't be surprised. It's like, oh, this is a nice rock shape. Oh, of course, it's Rico's work. Thumbs up to Rico on that one. I like it, but it's just... I think maybe what we'll do is yeah, I like it here, because then, I like what it does over here, because then you get a little bit of a teaser for what's on the other side, and then you go over to the other side, and then you have a little bit of that remnant plus the new rock shape. Okay, some more comments. North Carolina don't have a permanent layout. Plan to model the Southern Railway. Lot of different elements of Southern you could do for sure. Southern was very diverse scenically as well as operations. Dylan, O-scale, high rail, or HO, not sure yet. Mostly enjoy the planning and research. Honestly, that's what led to doing these layouts, is planning and research for what I'd want to do for my own. Now I just happen to do even more of it than I thought I would be. Just a little rock up there. Something, just so it kind of gives the sense that it's going over the top too. Using trains to build my, CJ, think about using trains to build my basement size model railroad. Probably won't be able to build. So expensive and so much space to build the massive layouts. This is true. And honestly, I've found that building massive layouts in the sim helps to kind of scratch the itch in some ways, so that even though I'd like to build... Oh yeah, this is nice, but this is not for this route. I think we'll stick with that. And we want to search PBR. But yeah, it helps to scratch an itch. I mean, nothing replaces model railroading having that physical layout, but if you're modeling Norfolk and Western, to not have to buy 6 Y6Bs because you're modeling N&W coal branches and coal mains, and yeah, you're going to see something like that on the show, is nice. Especially since it's kind of... I'm such a person who's about whims. I like... I'll try this idea on a whim. I'll try that idea on a whim. And, doing it here, it's very easy to do that on a whim. Okay, I think what we're going to end up doing is probably starting with a base grass and then adding rocks where we see fit. I don't know if I want to do the same grass as I used on the other side. I think that because these are two... The advantage that we have, or that you have in general, whenever you're doing a two-sided 3x6 or 4x8 where you've got some divider down the middle, nobody's ever going to see the whole thing at once. So what you do on one side could be drastically different. I mean, this could be a completely different feel. Like, we could do a whole gigantic city, because you don't ever see those two sides side by side, except for maybe here, but even there's tricks you can employ to make that... not an issue. Whole hog on O-scale until MTH died. Yeah. So, funny story about MTH. So, it's fitting that my first layout here is Canadian Pacific, because my dad raised me on a very steady diet of Canadian Pacific and Canadian National because he grew up in southern Canada in the 50s. And for a long time, model railroad manufacturers just had no clue that there was this country called Canada that was to the north of the United States. You'd be lucky to find anything painted CP or CN, not guaranteeing that it actually would be accurate, but you'd even be lucky just to have something quasi-accurate. Your options were slim. And then MTH came along, and they rolled out not just, say, EMDs or Alcos with the correct numbers and the correct paint schemes, but they were doing Canadian National 6060, which is a distinctly Canadian locomotive. They were doing the Royal Hudson. They were doing these specifically Canadian models. And so my dad was previously doing Hornby Triane trains, which is an interesting story in and of itself. And then he switched to O-scale and built up this huge collection of CP and CN, and even a little Toronto, Hamilton, and Buffalo and stuff like that. So yes, not that now I'm very firmly in the HO camp, just because of being able to do things that size-wise are going to work. But I respect MTH for bringing an awareness to this country called Canada that really wasn't getting much love outside of that. So, I agree with you on this. Phoenix, this will be on the DLS? Yes. At this point, the routes that you're seeing on what makes this layout great, both live, such as tonight, as well as ones that I'm putting on the show, download station. Because I think that's part of the fun of this. It's nice to actually be able to share this stuff with you so that you can see it for yourself, you can analyze it, you can tweak it to your heart's content and get ideas from it. That's part of the fun of building this. I have this thing, and maybe you guys feel it too, maybe it's just me. It's tough at times to overcome the challenge of that model railroading tends to be, not always, because if you have a club you get to share it, but it tends to be this personal basement or personal bedroom thing that doesn't get to be shared. And for me, I struggle with the idea of, okay, someday I'm going to build a train layout, but only people who know me are going to get to see it. It won't stop me, but it is a shame that it doesn't get to have a larger audience. I love the fact that the work that I get to do through this sim gets to be shared with others, and likewise that other people share their work. I mean, honestly, this sim exists on the strength of its community and the strength of being able to, we'll do Riverbed. The strength of being able to sharing assets, sharing ideas, sharing route building tech. I mean, that is what makes this continue to succeed as a sim, because I'm not much of a 3D modeler at this point. So being able to just have all these buildings and so forth ready to go, or collaborate with Rico, who's helped me build some structures, that's invaluable. So that's another reason I'm a big proponent of train simulators, is because then everybody gets to have fun. We get to collectively share in this work that we do. So yes, long answer to your short question, this will be on the download station. When, hopefully a few weeks. It really is contingent on what kind of other details I might add outside of the live stream. But it shouldn't be long. Because honestly, my plan is once this is done being built, it will get featured on a regular episode of What Makes This Layout Great. because it's a good opportunity to talk about this in a more concise way and a more packaged way to say, here's the final product, here's what it looks like. But you guys are here because you're curious about the behind the scenes and understanding how these get built and so forth. And I'm with you on that. Well, of course I'm with you. I'm the one building it. All right. So yes, this definitely will get shared. I like that. I like that. I'm gonna fix this track issue now so that isn't distracting me. HO is just such a pain to work with. It's just so hard to make things run smoothly without spending hours tuning and tinkering. O scale, you just put it on the track, it just works 9 out of 10 times. I guess that's true sometimes. I don't know. I haven't had much issue when I've worked with O scale. Are there advantages to doing or working with HO? Are there advantages to O? Of course. And we will cover some O scale builds because obviously O, you need more room. It comes with its challenges, especially if you're trying to do operations with O. But if you're doing a shelf layout, you could do that in a relatively small space. If you're doing ON30, which is technically HO track, then you could do that in a relatively small space. So yes. But honestly, that's kind of the beauty of having so many different options as far as these scales are concerned. Hey, Texas County. Glad you could join us tonight. How's it going? Well, you can see for yourself. I'm really I like how this cliff scene has turned out. We're gonna... See, I don't know that I want to do the full cliff thing along this whole edge, because I kind of like the idea of switching it up. So I think we'll do more trees on the right side. Let's get this tree divider in here, and that's going to help indicate what I want to do. So forest. We're gonna do a forest undergrowth kind of texture for this area. We're just gonna kind of rough it for now. Obviously, we'll be refining that as we go, and then we'll do that. We'll add some more grass here. Obviously, this is gonna get ballasted, but we're just getting this in because I want to get these trees in to see, okay, how is this actually gonna work when we're all said and done. Tree time! Just like tea time, but with trees. I mean, tea is made from plants, so I guess you could say that there's a similarity there. And we'll just vary them around a bit. We'll get some more trees placed up here. Oh, definitely some more pines, some more elks, because we just want nice different range of trees. I will tell you, the number one, as a model railroader, as somebody who has built dozens and dozens of trees, it is so nice to just copy paste your trees. If you're in model railroading and you do your own trees by hand, I mean, it's a meditative thing, but if you're doing a giant hillside, boy, does that take time. Whereas here it's like, oh, there's a tree here, there's a tree here. Oh, there's another tree there. It's just so much simpler. Again, not knocking railroading. I've done the tree building thing for my own Fonda Johnstown and Gloversville shelf layout, so I'm totally on board with the idea of doing it. Just say that a lot of trees are a lot of trees. Hi from New Zealand. Oh, hi. As moderator of Rob Chant's Journal of Model Railroading Design, I'm enjoying this. Have used trains when it first came out, but now model HO Santa Fe. Regards, Alan from New Zealand. Well, thank you for tuning in, Alan. And yes, trains has evolved so much. There's a good video out by a guy called Amtrak Guy 365, and he did a sort of recap of the series' 20-year history, and it has evolved so much. It's kind of interesting how it's come full circle for me, where Trainsy started as a model railroad simulator. Then it started to move more in the direction of being a real world train simulator. And since then, a lot of people have created model railroading assets to take it back to its roots. But to be fair, it's taking it back to its roots, but it looks so much better than it did back in 2004. My first version of trains was UTC, Ultimate Trains Edition, Ultimate Trains Collector Edition. But basically the second version that ever came out publicly. The first time I ever saw it, I was at a train show, and then somebody was demonstrating it, and I was blown away by how much stuff he had. Keep in mind, we're talking 2002, 2003, so I mean, you didn't have a lot of simulators out there in general, and even where the Sims existed, you didn't have a wide range of content available for them. Nothing comparatively to what you see today, just not even close. So to see this guy's gigantic list of engine from all around the world, it was we left that train show with Trains UTC, and I loved it from day one. It was so much fun, and I've kind of gone in and out of playing it over the years. I reviewed some routes for it on At the Rail Yard, but ever since 2019 is when I started to get back into it. Been about 3 years of doing this route building, and ever since getting back into it, I've just really come to love what it offers on the route building front. The other Sims still very much have their place. I'm a firm believer in that there's no one right Sim for everybody. It really depends on what you're looking to get out of it. Oh, but man, oops. What a nostalgia trip to think about the early days of train simulation, the early days of Train Z. Hey, would it be okay if I do a review of Toomey's Trains Milwaukee Road route in the same style as you did it at the rail yard, giving you inscriptional credit, of course? I mean, obviously, you're welcome to do a product review of a train's route as you see fit. I mean, the credit's flattering, but, you know, have fun with it. You know, just don't call it at the rail yard, but other than that, do what you want with it. I've seen videos that I could tell were very heavily inspired by At the Rail Yard, and honestly I find it a huge compliment. It's great to know that what the style I set up through the show continues to resonate with people, and hopefully I'm bringing some of that to what makes this layout great, especially the edited episodes. Because I want them to have those same cinematic qualities, even though we're not reviewing trains and products like we used to in the same way. It still lends itself creatively to that. I have a feeling we're going to do a spline on this, because ignore the fact that the water's bright blue. And actually, I don't even have to ignore it. I could just change it pretty quickly. But even if we change the water and darken it, it's a bit see-through. And the moving waves are nice if you're going to have like super choppy seas. But for a lake, it'd be pretty calm. And I don't want to be able to see the bottom of this. So we'll probably replace that with a spline. Let's ballast this. This is looking pretty good. I'm gonna adjust the track a little bit. I want to bring it a bit closer to the other spur, just because I don't think it needs to be that far out. It looks a little wide here for a passing siding. We will want to keep car clearance in mind, but even there, I don't think that's going to be a major deal. Oh, inspirational is what you meant, as opposed to scriptural. That's okay. Yes. Well, and I'm flattered that you found the series inspirational. So do share once you've put that together. Feel free to share with me what you've done. I think the big philosophy I had with At the Rail Yard when I was doing product reviews is that the more that you can generalize what you're talking about and make it approachable from an outside perspective, then the larger story there is to tell. When I first started the show, it was very much down the middle. Here's this route, and here we are reviewing it. And then, as you could probably tell if you followed through the years, you'd see that there'd start to be more history, more archival footage, and that was deliberate on my part. I wanted to push myself creatively, but I also felt like I didn't want to limit myself to just trying to appeal to fellow train simmers. I wanted to make the content appeal to general railroaders, general history buffs, and so I had a lot of fun tweaking that. And even this show, I'm mindful about, okay, here's this sort of base layer of, we're talking about train layouts, but are there larger stories beyond that we could explore? It's an interesting balance to kind of weave. Let's see. First Trains game was 2006. Played the demo for 2004. Wolf Over the Hanging Rock, Phoenix. Yeah. Or a moose. I mean, maybe it's a little too cliche, but, you know, we gotta have some Easter eggs here. Let's see if I've got a moose handy. Yes, we've got a moose. We've got a moose. Now, this might be, like, a little too, like, obvious and tacky, but you know what? I like your idea, Phoenix. We're gonna put it in there. I think we gotta do it. Just because it's worth having some fun and playing with this a bit. So we need to get him at the right elevation. Obviously, the challenge we have here that we don't have in model rarity is we have to fit him to the shape. Oof. And then we click on him and he goes flying. Okay, we gotta do the top-down thing. I mean, it's a little cliche. I mean, I guess it's sort of like the Great Northern, the goat. I guess it's kind of like that. But, I mean, moose in real life, I've seen moose in real life. They are shy creatures. So the likelihood that one's just proudly standing out and looking over, I don't know. Thumbs up for moose. What do you guys who are part of this live? Yay for moose, or do I need to go with something a bit more subtle? I'm open to your thoughts on that. Okay. Oh, trees, right. So we're going to do more grass and more detailing here. This track in particular, this runaround, we're going to... Like, this could work. If we were doing Canadian Pacific Mainline, this is a great scene as is. But we want to give that backwoods feel. We might even use a version of the track without ballast. But I think we could do it terrain-wise and grass. Do you think there will be any chance Microsoft will revive the Microsoft Train Sim brand? No. They had a chance back in the late 2000s. But I know that they've restructured their game studios. It's a different market. You know, you have all these independent studios and elements coming out with... I like that big tree. We'll leave that there for the moment. I don't see MSTS2 ever being an official thing. That said, I don't think it needs to. Why? Because we've got Open Rails. Open Rails is a wonderful sim. And it's backwards compatible with MSTS stuff. So I don't know that there's a need for an MSTS2. Maybe 10 years ago I would have said, oh, but it'd be really nice to have this and that. But you look at all the games that have games and sims that have come out since. You've got Run 8, Train Sim World, Railroads Online, and the list keeps growing. Nah, I don't see it coming back. But I also feel like there's a lot to celebrate for what there is. This I'm digging. I'm digging this tree separator. Because see what we've got here. We haven't even put any type of backdrop to separate these two elements. But look. Now, again, yes, if we're looking at it from a big wide spectrum, you can see kind of the whole picture. But if we're in the scene, guys, if we're in the scene, now, even this crane, like, we can see a bit of it. And we're going to play around with having some fun with the crane, but we'll get back to that thought in a moment. But even with being able to see the crane, and honestly, I could just find another one of these tall trees, and that's not even an issue anymore. So I need something around 30 meters high, it looks like. We're going to get that. Maybe one of those Sosnas would be good. The Sosnas tend to be pretty tall. 25? That's a bit... Nope. Challenge is some of these trees are nice, but they are a bit bright. Kind of what I was looking for, but there's more in this field. Well, this isn't tall, but it is a nice tree. The Sosnas are so nice. They're probably my favorite group of these types of trees because they lend themselves so well to up close. In fact, I like them so much. We're going to place a few over here to remind myself of how much I like them, because this is going to get built up a little bit. And ooh, that's nice. We'll put that over here. We'll see if that... Yeah, that'll work. But yeah, see, now you can still see the crane. But the point isn't to completely obstruct it. The point is to say, if you're paying attention to the train, which is usually what you're paying attention to, now you've got this scene that feels removed from the logging camp. I think a wolf would be pretty good instead of a moose. Eat the moose. Moose. It looks like moose is winning, guys. Looks like we're keeping the moose. Even if it's a little too hood ornament obvious, we're keeping the moose. Look, if you download it and you want to switch it with a fox or some other critter, I'm not going to take that away from you. Go for it. But we're keeping the moose. Name for the moose. Anybody want to put a name for the moose out there? I'm open to names. I'll tell you what, if you come up with a good name for the moose, I'll name this switch. The switch that's here, I'll name that after the moose. And that'll be an in-joke between us. Howdy. Hey Nick, how's it going? You could try putting a river spline under the normal water to get it being less transparent. That is a good idea. See, this is why I love building alongside you guys. You guys have such good ideas. I'm going to give that a try now. So, we'll do river 25 meter. Because the truth is, it does not need to be... I think we're going to need to do wider. We'll need to do 15 meter. Now. And we're lining that up with... So, here's our water. And then we're just tucking it underneath the main water level, which is... Well, actually, we don't even have to worry about that because the river spline is a little transparent, so it can still show through. Ah, yeah, I like that. We'll put it here. We'll probably have to play with it when we build our fascia and that kind of stuff. But that's good for now. Yep. Very good idea, Audi. Now we still got the reflections, we still got this sheen, but we're not realizing how shallow it is. Mosser? Eddie. Okay, I got a couple of moose name suggestions. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. We'll see how they go. So this is looking pretty good. Oh, let's do this corner while we're at it. So if we go back, I'm pretty sure this corner is elevated. Yeah, you can see by the dotted lines that their intention is that you elevate it pretty steeply, and that's what we're going to do here. Good rule of thumb or trick when you're building a 3x6 or a 4x8 roundy like this. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. You could trim your corners so that you're, rather than having the triangles on the sides, you could just have that be your fascia right next to the track. But the advantage with keeping the corners is that it does give you a built-in backdrop, especially for a scene like this. So here we have this scene. The whole scene is if we're looking at the car ferry. But even if we look here, this is a scene in and of itself. By having trees in the backdrop along that corner, we're going to be in good shape as far as then you have less photoshopping to do to make it seem... Oh, right, and we're doing the snow shed. Yes, we are doing the snow shed. So we'll put that second. Not sure how realistic the snow shed would be with slopes on two sides, but I prefer to do it on this side. The other side will kind of keep to just a valley pass, like what this looks like at the moment. This is going to be our outside guide. And let's see how... We could go pretty high. And I am kind of inclined to, because I like the idea of... it makes for a good backdrop for this, but it also makes a really good backdrop for... it makes it, and yet again, another one of those micro scenes within the larger context of things. So, and I think this is technically the edge, although we're actually going to probably expand it out to this edge. So we'll add this as a little bit more of a slope. And this is also, too, where you could get into some creative decision-making. So if we went... We could alternatively go super low, and then you have that ability to look up at the train as if it were on some kind of ridge. Given that it's right next to these scenes, I'm inclined to not do the ridge approach. We're going to do the valley approach for this. But it has a nice round... It's like a bowl. It just rounds off the corners in a really nice way. I used to do ceramics. Any of you guys do ceramics? Molly, Alistair, do other Easter... Yeah, we'll have some fun with the Easter eggs. Don't worry about it. Yes to the moose head, make it more of an Easter egg and not in the open. I actually put a lot of Easter eggs. I'll tell you what, we'll keep the moose in the open, but if you guys could think of another Easter egg that would fit the theme of this layout, whether it be something fun to hide away in the city here, in the industry, drop it in the comments, and we can make that happen. All right, yeah. So this is our, and we're gonna then ease out of it because we can have a little bit of a ledge here, and I think we should. Again, the more you play with your landscape, the less it has of that, oh, this started out as a flat sheet of plywood kind of feel. Helps to give it that, especially because all of this track is 0% grade. So the more we could give the illusion of it existing within the landscape, better off we are. I like that. That's going to be our terrain. So now we're going to add grass. Oh, I want to get that corner even first. I think that is that's the edge we're going with. So we'll just get this corner nice and even, and then we can go about treeing this up, and then we'll just finish up what I'm going to call the lake scene here. Oh, like this view right here. And this is a really, when you think about how you would be viewing this layout in real life, there's this top down, but you're looking through the trees. So it's another way of creating depth that works really well with the line of sight, even if you're not... I gotta move this. I'm casting shadow on myself. Even if you're not at looking at the track at eye level, you have a way of looking into the scene. That's the kind of stuff you discover when you're getting to play around, as we are doing here. See, I feel like these trees are getting to be a little too obvious, so I want that. Oh yeah, because they're sawsnows. MR base maps. Oh, I know one. On there. Yep. But if we do something like that, and we height adjust them. Yep, I like that. And we'll just have a lower. Probably use some more cushed bushes around here as well. Yeah, not so tall, but sure. Ooh, I like that. And then we'll shrink that one down. Yep. Yeah, see that backdrop? That's what we're working towards. We'll grab some of the ones from over here too, some of the yasms. Make it nice and thick so that you've got this sense of really deep growth, and that maybe there's whole woods beyond what we're seeing here. Yeah. There's a time and a place for keeping the trees thin, like the foreground that we have to the town. But there's also a time and a place where you just want to layer it on. Like here, this is a good place to keep it thin, because you do kind of want to be able to see the tree. In fact, this is probably too big a tree as it is. There was a smaller sosna over here. Yes, like so. Although now it feels too much like, hey, look at this row of perfectly neat trees. So we're gonna play with spacing. We're gonna get some nice pushed bushes in there, because that's how we have some depth to the scenery. Yeah, yep. And look at that. See, another like little viewing window that we just created. You could be, and that's accidental, but you could be deliberate too in how you're thinking about tree placement and sort of creating these picture frame moments. Oh, that's going to be a nice one. To look at the train through, yep, basically right through there. That's a screenshot moment. Guess that's a question to ask yourself when you're building scenes, is what are your real life screenshot moments if you're building a layout? Obviously, we call them photo moments, but shows you how much time I spend in this sim referring to them as screenshot moments. That's not going to work there, because it'll work there for the time being, and then when we put the dig holes in, it won't work anymore. What are dig holes? You will see. Yeah, just a little bit more up there, and then I'm feeling really good about what that's going to look like. We could also do a little bit of varying the texture, but honestly, even just having that level of growth, yeah, I'm happy with that. Again, this means no need for snow sheds, which this prototype did not have. Yeah, this prototype did not have snow sheds. It will. I'll tell you what we'll do. Because I'll tell you what, like, I am liking this even without the snow shed. You could do it differently. But in the interest of just experimenting, let's see what it's like if we put a snow shed here. We don't really need it, because at this point, there's no way you're going to see those two. And just by building up this corner, now you have no way of viewing those two halves at the same time. Even top down, you don't really have a good view of both. So we've really separated them out. But let's have some fun and see if there's some snow sheds we can use here. If not, I could probably run over to the snow shed cap. Okay. I think I know how this is being intended to use. I will confess, This is my first time building any kind of snow shed. I'll tell you what, I like the way the timber looks coming over the track. Like, you could even, I don't know, I like the idea, even if we don't go with a snow shed, of doing something that would be, something that would be abandoned. Maybe once upon a time there was some sort of cable tramway, or I'm not sure. But you see what I'm getting for here? Like, even just having these two arches, who knows what they are? Who knows what they did? I don't know, but they look cool. Like, it just, I like it for what it is. Even if we don't put a roof on it, we're keeping something along these lines. So are there... Okay, here we go. Oh, I see. Okay, so that's the actual snow shed in its full snow shed form. As I said, I have not worked with snow sheds before, so this is a little bit of experimentation. But... and I see that's why those are the caps, because then you have a little bit that hangs off the end, but then you can just line it up and then it looks right. Okay. And then... Oh, that's the cliff. This is the other edge of the... Yeah, so if we go out to about here... And yes, I know we have trees through that. We'll... I like it. I mean, I will confess, I don't know how it lends itself to prototype. I mean, certainly not, again, not the Slocum Bay Railway, or the, not Slocum Bay Railway, the Caslow sub did not have snow sheds. Was actually not as mountainous as what you see here. This is way more mountain. This is more of a bit south of where it was, in terms of how it's represented. What do you guys think? Yay or nay on the snow shed? I'm inclined to keep it. I think... Oh, no, I need to switch the splines. I'm inclined to keep it. I think it's nice. It's one other thing that adds a little bit of visual interest. So, I'm inclined to keep that. If you can think of a good reason why not, I'm flexible, but I think I like it for what it is. So the only thing I need to do is just, I'm probably going to take out these rocks that are, or manipulate the rocks that are hanging there, because they're a little bit like a frog looking out of a pond. But if we just sink them into the ground a bit more, and we move them like that, I like that. Maybe a bit. Nope, no, tree's fine. Lock down. Okay, I'm hearing one nay on the... I'm hearing a couple yays and one nay on the snow shed. Here's what we're going to do with the snow shed. And this gives us a chance to look at something I'm going to show you a bit more in detail later. Layer effects. So, 50s. So, in the 1950s, there was still a snow shed here. By the 70s, it had gone. Now, how can we do that on the same layout? Or in the same... Yeah, how can we have both? How can we have it both ways in the same virtual layout? Obviously, if you're modeling in real life, you have to make a decision. But here, you don't immediately have to. Because what you can do is assign objects to layers. And once you do that, you have the ability to toggle those layers. Think of it like Photoshop. I think that's going to do it. So it's like Photoshop, if you've played with Photoshop or GIMP, where you have different layers of effects and you can turn them on and off. That's exactly what you could do here. Okay, so that toggled our object. Now we need to toggle the spline. And that's gonna go here. And now, there. Problem solved. If you like the snow shed, you get the snow shed. If you don't like the snow shed, you don't get it. But we'll leave it in the 1950s layer because it makes more sense that it used to exist and then there wasn't enough snowfall, fell into disrepair. But we'll leave it for 50s. Okay. Fun, but that's the fun of this, is getting to explore different ideas, and maybe you like one thing, maybe you don't. You can try it both ways. You can have it built so that then you can show it to other people and say, hey, which of these versions do you like better? And then you haven't really gotten rid of any of your work. You're just playing around with different eras of it. I like that. I mean, I could see the case for both. I can. Yes, Dylan, it is super cool to be able to toggle layers. We're going to play more around with that when we get to the log loading area. Let's get these switch stands replaced because you don't need... That's going to be one of those things I forget, and then I feel like... Oh dear. Oh, last call for moose names. Last call for the moose names. We're going to go with yard 6. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Last call for moose names because I'm in the process of doing switches now. Yep. And delete there. Now I'll admit a lot of times with switches, it gives you these random names like Junction 716. I'll just put in apostrophe or something. Is there something to be said for neatly labeling them and giving them all names? Yeah, but on the other hand, you could do that with track markers, and the advantage is the track markers you're going to see in the map. So, perfect example, log loader. Boom. So I don't really need to label that switch log loader because, well, now I have this track marker, and when we go into drive mode, you'll see it there. Still have a cap midway in the snow shed. Yes, this is technically true. We'll get that cap sorted out. There's the cap. And we'll place it this way. I like this asset, though. This is a really nice one. Sometimes, honestly, there are times when it's like, I'm going to find more by this person just because they did such a nice job with building this one thing I like. And the texturing on this is nice. Those are nice textures. Okay. And truth be told, I mean, there's so much... You could do a full-fledged tunnel through this if you wanted to. Have the tunnel portal here and do it. I would not. I feel like one of the cliches of model railroad design, and I apologize if you do this with your layout, and that's not to say it's always a bad thing, but I feel like we've seen so many 4x8s that have that random mountain in the corner. Like, most of the layout, 70-80% of the layout is perfectly flat, and then there's one random mountain in the corner. Like, that... So, we wouldn't have that issue here because we are within the mountains, but then there's less visual running. So, trade-offs, and I just like the way we've got it, and we've got it really well scenically divided here at the moment, so I'm going to leave it as is. Michael the Magic Moose. Because how did he get there and how will he get down? Okay, Michael it is. So what we're going to do, because you gave me a story. You win because you gave me a story to go along with it, and I dig that. We're going to use that's number 6, so we're going to use number 5. And this is... I can't go with... It has to seem like an actual location, so we're going to call this CP Michael. CP Michael. So people are gonna be like, why is that Twitch randomly named CP Michael? And that's gonna be for those guys, for those of you who are tuning in. Now you know. All right. Last thing I think we're gonna do for this part of the scene is we're gonna add some grass. And actually, just today, I downloaded some really nice spline grass assets. And so we're going to play around with those a bit. These TRK grass ones, they're 19 friendly, which is to say they don't cast weird shadows. I'm not sure how new they are, but they're new to me. Now, grass assets are another thing where you want to be careful about just going too continuous with them, or it looks like a pattern. So you have to kind of be random about it. But if you kind of do a little bit off at this angle, we'll do a little bit of these guys that also segue into the mountainside scenery. Then you could get away with it. Now that, yes. So now we're getting a little bit more of that effective. Like, yeah, there's ballast here, but there's also a lot of overgrowth. Oof, too much overgrowth. I like that, but too much. Now this, I like this as a side one, so I think we're going to use this along the mountain up to the rocks right about here. And then that'll segue out. Yeah, oof. Nice and lush. Too lush? Maybe around the trees. Like the way it's, I don't know. I'm gonna sit on that. I mean, it looks... I'm at least happy with how it looks. Let's get a little bit more growth down here, but thin stuff. More of this between the rails kind of itty-bitty weedy stuff, not the sort of... Not like a train hasn't been in it or in 20 years. Just like, oh, is that a... It's a little bit of a gap on that, which is interesting to me. So, ooh, and I'm realizing this is the only downside to building with layers. It is so easy to get caught up in things, and then you place all these assets, and then you realize, wait a second, wait a minute. I put all of those to the wrong layer, and now you've got to go back and change them. Because if we switch to root layer, and then where's our... Oh, that's the grass. Okay. We'll lower this a bit more. Yeah, so that covers that. But if we look at the grass assets we placed, we see they're in the 1950s, which means that when you go to change your session layer, now all of a sudden your grass assets are missing. This is a big issue I find when I'm placing all of the fascia and so forth, and you'll see why when we get to that in a bit. I think probably based on how we're doing, I don't know that this is going to be 100% done, but what we'll do tonight is we will get it to looking complete. So I'm going to get it scenic enough, and then I'll get the fascia in there, and then so that it looks complete enough, and then I might tweak it a bit before it goes to release. But I feel like we're so close to done on this. I don't know if if it makes sense to do one more stream with this or not. We'll see where we end up. Okay, and then when we toggle the 1950s layer, none of the grass is disappearing. This is a good sign. Okay, so we fixed that issue. But I'm pretty happy with that. I like that. And yeah, the grass is a bit thicker down here than it is by the mountains, but I think that kind of fits thematically. With if you're looking at from this direction to see it that way, and then the cliffs start to end and we start to see more lush ground. JVC track spline series. I do have those. Hi, Big John Rail. Thanks for joining us. I do have the JVCs. My issue is that some of the LODs are a little quick. Like, they disappear really quickly when you zoom out. Shout out to the friends of these broads up. So I use them in some places. But this, and here again, so now we're looking, now we're getting into the loading area, and now the flip side, well, yeah, the flip side to the having the tree block is now this area feels like a complete scene in and of itself. So here we've taken what could otherwise just be this wide open space, this wide open scene, and it's still wide open because we have this lake, and I don't regret doing that. Actually, I think I'm gonna do a little bit of this along the water's edge, just before I forget to do that, because I think that'll look good. So, and we can accent that more with some JVC stuff, wildflowers and the like. JVC wildflowers. Yeah. What kind of flower is it? I don't know. Would it be native to around here? I don't know that either, but it looks pretty. Shout out to Heiss, Mark Huber, who's provided the music for today's stream. If it sounds familiar, that's because it is the soundtrack to Railroads Online. I like the red. It's CP Rail red. They're CP Rail flowers. I made that up. It's by my own. Okay, so back to here though. Oh, right, I was talking about the scene. So you've got essentially with the snow shed, you have this one scene looking in this valley as your train's coming through. You've got a second scene, which is this whole lakefront scene. And now a third scene, which is the log loader area. So, we're going to play more with some of these layer effects, which is to say we're going to build a 1970s layer, we'll call it. Now, you have to be careful with how you do this. If you're doing track-sensitive objects, it's going to get funky. I don't recommend using... If you're going to have the train going over different track alignments, don't use layers for that. I tried that with the Reading and Northern route. I couldn't make it work. That's why there's two different versions on the download station. But for scenery assets that are trackside, should not be a problem. So this is going to be 1970s. This is going to be 1970s. I mean, honestly, the trailer might even be more modern than 1970s, but 1970s. Because then we can hide that. We can unlock the 1950s layer, and we can do something completely different. Let's see. RC crane, I think, is what I'm going to be looking for here. So this is probably... I mean, this is even pre-1950s. But I like them. They all seem to have... I don't know if there was a crane without... brief bit of shopping to see if there's some on the download, because I thought there were some logging cranes that didn't have Derek crane. Yeah, okay, so that's what we want. Derek crane. So this probably predates even the 1950s, but I like it. So, we've got a couple of these Derek cranes, so you... Obviously, given the constraints, you wouldn't be able to get every single flat car lined up to the crane unless you were doing a lot of switching. But I feel like that's one of the compromises we make with regards to industries on track plates. In fact, actually, I was talking with a guy on Facebook today, and he was saying this grain elevator. He was saying, shouldn't you put that further up because you've got this big industry, but it's at the end of the spur, so you can't shove a lot of cars back to it. And essentially, he's right. I mean, that's true. You'd have to do a lot of manual switching. But as I've said with some of the compromises I made with this layout in the first part of this stream, I'm building this to the plan as it was made. So if there's issues in the design, I'm still going with those issues in this case. And you could also make the case that it just doesn't have a very high throughput, because again, you're contingent in this operating scheme. You're contingent on how many cars you could get on and off the barge. So, you know, that's kind of a, and I feel like, you know, so how many of us have coal mines and only the rear cars can be serviced, but often when you're staging a session, you're not really thinking about switching that industry car for car. It's just this idea of getting a bunch of cars through the industry and getting a bunch of cars out, because we can't simulate loading and unloading in terms of, usually. Obviously exceptions. Yes, you could put logs on flat cars and so forth. Back to this scene though. We've got these cranes. I wanna do something with an office. Let's see what we've got that would make sense as sort of, I want a worn out building type thing. Maybe it doesn't have to be worn out, but certainly something that here's a head cannon. Nice office. Got burned in a fire in the late 50s, and so then the trailer comes into its place. And I'm just going to make sure, yeah, this is 1950s. Now, watch this trick. Okay, so one day I want to play 1950s. I've got the old school style office with the old school style cranes. Boom. Now we're in the 70s with the modern trailer and the modern crane. And obviously you could have them both. I don't think you'd want that, but technically you could. The other thing we'll need to do for the 50s layer is, since it doesn't come with log stacks, we're going to add some log stacks. And we'll just search log and see what it comes up with. They are logs. I mean, these are nice, but those are individual. Which, I guess we could put like one here, like it's about to be loaded. Log stacks. There we go. That's the ticket right there. So we've got some nice stacks ready to go here. And obviously I'm improving this, so if you, anytime you're modeling, if you have actual photos to go off of, that's better. But sometimes it could just be a matter of what you like anyway. So enough of those to feel a sense of, okay, there's a good amount waiting to go. And then we'll cap it with these ones here, or maybe just one, so it's not too symmetrical. Old passenger cars in office. There is such a car. I think it's baggage car. Derelict baggage car. Ooh, what did I do there? Oh, I turned a tree. There's this guy. I mean, arguably more fitting. I like this asset a lot. But it might be a little too far gone, even as an office. Might be a bit even as an office. And also, this is one of those assets I keep coming back to frequently, and I try not to be too cliche. I try to vary my asset selection a bit, so it doesn't feel too much like you're looking at the same thing over and over. Random side tangent. This is a nice building. Let's see if we can come up with something that maybe isn't quite as new as this, and kind of find a good compromise. Is this gonna be small enough? Nope. That's not gonna be small enough. I want to use something like this would be good. I think it might be a Jume. It might be a, like, these are good assets, but I don't want to include Hayware assets in this. I want to make it. Oh, this might be the key. Something like this. This one's a little bit too nice looking, but it is more size appropriate. No, that's not gonna work. I don't want to get too down on this. Can we tell this is a post? Yeah, we can tell that's a post office. I think we'll probably end up leaving it, and if we need to change it, we will change it. Nope. Office shop. A bit too big. Yeah, this is why I try to get assets lined up in advance where possible so that I'm not doing too much of this. I mean, I don't know. We'll go with the green for now. Let's just say somebody got creative and went for a fresh look. It gives it a little bit of character too, because maybe it'd be too obvious to do the derelict wood building. But there was a fire, burned down, so in the 70s it got replaced by the trailer. I like that. I like that. We're going this way. Okay. Groundwork here. Obviously, we're keeping this mostly flat. We'll do a little bit of landscaping here on the edge, just a tiny trace amount, just to give a sense of like, no, this isn't perfectly level, but we're really minor work here. Now, I don't know if the plan, if they put a hill here or not. Oh, and we'd better lock up that 1950s layer before I start placing assets and making the same mistake again. Yep, they have a hill. So we're going to do a hill here too. And again, we don't have a lot of room to do a huge hill, but we do have... we can place more trees there. And that'll be a good way of accentuating that. And separating the two. Because I do think we want to separate... it'll be nice to visually separate the logging area from this view here. And it already pretty well is, but just to kind of seal the deal for this part right here. And it provides a nice backdrop for this, for when you're looking along this way. So, texturing. Buffers. Yeah, let's get some haze buffers there while I'm thinking of it. Good reminder there. And actually should also put some on that track there. And I do have some right here. So we'll get some. Right, long layer selected. At least I'm typically good about locking the base maps layer. That one I have committed to memory. I don't always remember the other ones. I should pick up. And then I'm just going to make sure that we can... I think we're actually going to end up using this as our corner. So we'll get the track adjusted. Might be taking it slightly out of 3x6, but you're still getting the general gist of how it compacts down. Here we're going to do a base layer of dirt, like this mud layer, and we're going to do that through here, just all through here. And then what we'll be doing is adding variations on that theme. And the divider is going to be this closer yellow line, so basically up to here. So that's our base layer. Obviously very repetitive, very monotone. We're just using that as the base layer. Why is there a snow shed on a British Columbian island railroad which never had snow sheds? Well, technically this is a fictional British Columbia island Or, well, and it wasn't actually an island railroad. It had more to do with the surrounding topography, which is why they did the barge operations. I don't know. I didn't of all the design elements, I did figure the snow shed would be the most controversial. But again, feel free to adapt as you see fit. I'm going to use a darker mud for. I like this texture for around there, but we are going to use a little bit of a darker mud. Do I want to flatten that and have room for park? Nah, I don't want to spend too much room for parking. Sorry, employees. And don't have to be sorry. They're in the unmodeled void of the abyss. We're gonna add a little bit more of the this grass. We're gonna add a little bit more of that. Just by layering those, it can be a bit varied, and it kind of provides a nice transitional point between those two. Let's look for some more PBR dirt. An island in British Columbia, never too lush. Don't forget to check the other crane. Yeah, I don't think that should be an issue because that object is basically centered around here, so the elevation should not mess with it, but since you bring it up, we'll take a look. Yep, still works. So yeah, at this point we're just going to vary the textures a little bit. We're going to adding a little bit of red, just a bit of color, a bit of variety. I want a dark brown. Some of these textures you run into the issue that you can see too clearly what the pattern is. It could work at a little spot like somewhere over here. Actually, if we do it like that, I think it can work under the context of the piles. And then how well does that line up with the 70s? Works for me. But I just don't like, you see, it works for the 50s, but then the 70s, it's a bit too obvious, like, oh, here's your piles. So I think we're gonna have to mix that with something else. Not that. Ground rubble. See, here, I feel like the stones are too big, scale-wise. Oh, maybe a little bit of that, but I'm not totally sold on it. I mean, it's a lot of just kind of experimenting. And now this I like as a transitional texture between here and here. I like that. One good thing about this sim, you'll never run out of different ground textures you can do. And it gives you a lot of variety with how you place things and where you go creatively. Okay, there we go. That's the texture I want. Not that I'm going to replace all that forest stuff with it, but I think this is more what I'm going for aesthetically. You know, these chunks of rock, not too much of it starts to become obvious, but I like what it does, especially around the base around here. Gonna want some more trees over here. In general, let me make sure I'm not on a layer. I am. Although, fortunately, if you lock a layer and then you try to place assets on it, it'll say you can't do that because you locked this layer, which is the point at which I go, you're right, and I did that for good reason. So let us leave that layer locked and move forward. That's maybe a bit overpowering. I read somewhere somebody was talking about the fact that a lot of times when modelers do trees, they tend to do them small, which is true because I realized I was doing that on my own layout. But that said, I think even when you have trees that are realistic height, it's sometimes a question of what makes the most sense in the context of the scene that you're creating in front of you. Let's just fill out a couple more Yazans here. Here. Will the route contain consists? I'll probably do a base session which can contain things that are staged. I'm doing that with the Lake Erie, Franklin, and Clarion when I release that. There was a base session, so it gives you rolling stock to download. The only trick with the 1970s version, maybe do 50s version. Yes, there will be base sessions so that you, and I'm not big into trying to do the programming after the fact of like giving you the specific destinations and coding those in. But I'll in the description for the base session, I'll say these cars go here, these cars go here. I'll explain it so that you have a sense of how to go. Or I'll link it to the video, depending on which comes first. Probably the release. I tend to release the routes and then put the video out. That's a good tree for here, though. And actually, this would be a good area for a Sosna tree, too. So, wider foot-brace tree there. We'll put that one here. And I'm looking for a itty-bitty Sosna. Like that one. Just a few trees. And then some kush bushes. Which is, I know, kush is bush in the language it's in, but just a little something. But see, just a little island of scenery. Now there's more of that sense of separation. So if you're looking at a train from... Yes, I know those cars are off. If we're looking at a train from this perspective, it's drawing your attention to that. It's helping you to kind of ignore the existence of the log camp and so forth, which I think you want. Now here we're going to do things differently. Remember how on the other side I said we want to be viewing that from the top down? Now here I think they intend for you to view it that way, but we'll do a little bit more of the if you were looking up. So we'll actually lower the landscape around here. Maybe there's a river down below that comes close to the track. I don't know, but now just because everything else is sort of looking at the track down for the most part, this gives us a little place where now we can actually look up at the train, just subtly. I don't want to make it an extreme change. Yes, Rico, your cranes are getting used. Most handy. Or at least they're getting used in the 1950s. And just to check, if we go back to the 70s, how things look. Yep. I'm happy with that. I'm actually really happy with that. And you see now, even with the, again, very tall crane. You may not have something as big if you were to model this in reality. But we also haven't put in the scenic divider. That we will do shortly. I want to finish everything up as far as making sure we've got some grass around here in the lake, and then we will oh, yep, 1970s. Okay. Then we'll do then we'll start to get into the model railroad elements. What's going to turn this into a train layout? Because I want to finish enough of the scenery. Again, we may not hit 100%, but we'll finish enough of the scenery. It's a bit too bright. I like it, but it's a bit too bright as a grass texture. Let's see what we got, JVC, if there's something a bit more yellow. I mean, I like those flowers, but that wasn't what well, I like those flowers. We'll put them here just to have something. I mean, I like this as a spline. This seems to... It has a little bit of that shadow issue, but it still kind of works. I think we'll use that right over here. I like the idea of using that along this edge. And what we'll do is we'll just layer it a ton so that it looks properly thick. Maybe we'll do this throughout. Maybe we'll just kind of edge all of the... Yeah. Yeah, I think that works enough. And then edge for along here. And then I like that. Works for me. I have to read your name. Oh, yes, Professor. Exactly. So, you know, there are going to be times on the show where I do quote unquote fix things or I do modify them because I just really want to change that element of the design. But honestly, I think that there's a time and a place to look at what the flaws are and say, you know, yes, it doesn't change it from being a great layout. It's still a nifty layout, but you know, I'm not sure about this, that, or the other thing. And sometimes you don't know until you build it. That's gonna come up in some episodes where I built it and then it was through playing it on this. When I was looking at it in Model Railroad or wherever I sourced it, it looked super cool. Having built it, it's still super cool. But now when I'm playing it, I realize, I'm not a fan of how this runs. And yeah, I could then go back and modify it, but I feel like I built the layout. You know, people talk about, oh, my layout's never done. I'm constantly tweaking it. I'm constantly improving it. I like saying this thing is done. I like getting to a point. What's your opinion on this? I like building a layout and having a point where I say this is done, this is complete, I'm not doing anything more with this. I know some people really love continuing to tweak and to play with things, and you know, if that's your modeling style, more power to you. But for me, with these trains projects, I like hitting a point where I finish the route, I release it, and having the release is handy, because once it's released, it's released. I can make tweaks, and yeah, technically I could patch it, but unless something's majorly broken, I want to say it's done. And that's where I fall here, is wanting to, you know, have a point at which I say this is done. Okay, now these flowers I'm gonna have to make to the 1970s layer, because otherwise they will appear in the 50s and they might not quite work for that. But I like that, just a little bit of color highlight, and let's just do some regular grass for these areas right around here. Ooh, yeah, I like that. Just adds that little bit of like, hey, it's been here a while. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And sometimes it's a little difficult when you have assets placed close together. So we'll do this. It just adds a little bit of character. Now that trailer it looks like it belongs there. And that's true if you're doing structures and model railroading as well. Adding little details to make it seem like this building has been here for a while. I am pretty happy with that. Like, yeah, could probably be fine-tuned and tweaked. I know the last thing we'll do. We're gonna add a truck. I think I have a truck looked out for me in here. That is not a truck. Let's see. Oh. Well, that wasn't the type of truck I was thinking of, but sure. And we'll put that there. A lot of yellows. This is a very yellowy scene, but nothing wrong with that. It's kind of it's a theme. But we're gonna search log truck because I do want something here too. That could be nice for the 50s. It's a little flat on the texturing, but this is probably later than 70s. Also a little under detailed. Ooh, I like this. This is a nice vehicle. I mean, it's a bit. Obviously, you're not hauling big amounts of logs on this like you would with the other trucks, but as maybe like a service vehicle. This is one of those assets where I don't know if it fits 100%, but it's a nice truck. So we're going to put it in there. And again, just to show you, so we've got all this detail, all these vehicles and whatnot, and if we want to disable that, and if we want to go back to the 1950s, done. Super easy. I love that about this sim. The ability to toggle layers. And it doesn't impact how your trains run at all. You could be mid-session running, go into survey or switch your eras and keep running. So I think, you know, yeah, I could probably use a car and stuff, but I don't want to get too much into asset hunting. I'm comfortable enough with this as a scene. I want to, given how we're doing, I want to get, I want to get the grass in here, and then I want to start showing you how we're going to actually turn this into a layout. So, oh, right, and I've locked the 1970s layer, so we are not going to do that. We're going to go to the main layer. We're going to add a couple more trees here. Should I put some rocks? Yeah. Actually, that... I don't want to use that one twice, though. But something like that... I don't know. Maybe it's a little too repetitive from what I've done previously. I like it. Maybe we'll just do the one. And yeah, maybe it's a bit too repetitive from side to side, but I don't think so. This one's a bit more, it's a bit more mossy. It's a bit more built in. I don't know. We'll go for a little bit of searching, just to see if we find something that maybe fits the bill a bit better. So so next week is going to be the release of the Lake Erie, Franklin, and Clarion as a recorded episode of What Makes This Layout Great. If you want to see that early, again, be sure to join the Patreon at patreon.com/theroundhouse. It'll be released tomorrow. But that said, so that'll be next week. And then the following week, we're going to be live again. And I've selected a route. I'm going to not say what it is, and I'm going to... Oh, I like that tree. Honestly, that might do the trick. Then it... Oh, yeah. I like how that looks like a bunch of kind of small bushes. Okay, that's what we're doing for this. But, yes, 2 weeks from now, we're going to start a new route, in all likelihood. Because I think it'll be good to vary it up. I've already selected a route. It's something different from this, both in terms of era and location and theming. But I'm curious to know, what would you guys like to see on... What kinds of layouts would you like to see on future episodes? Well, first let's start with live streaming. So, one of the big questions I've been asking myself, and now I'm going to ask you guys, is that... Do you prefer me doing smaller layouts like this, that I could finish in somewhere between 2, but no more than, say, 4 streaming sessions, while still being able to see the large amounts of stuff? Or how would you feel about switching it up? So obviously there's big layouts that I build, and you know, I wouldn't want to spend 3 months streaming a build of a big layout. But would you be okay of just like, hey, this week we're randomly going to look at this layout? Or do you prefer following smaller, shorter builds? Let me know in the comments. Whether you're watching this live or you're watching this pre-recorded, I'd really be curious to know, because that's something that I've kind of gone back and forth in my head on. I'm inclined to do more small builds like this, things that can be done in again, 2 to 4 build sessions. But if you guys don't mind seeing bigger builds, if you'd like to see, even if you're not following along for the entirety of the construction of a bigger build, let me know. I will take that into heart because I want this to be entertaining. I don't want this to get repetitive or old. I really want your feedback and input on this. One of the big things in my mind that's been for this series is making sure that this is community. So yes, I'm the one building the routes, but as you've seen, I've taken your input when designing these things, and I want to hear your suggestions, the kinds of layouts, what's helpful as far as topics of conversation. That's all really good to know. So those of you who are watching this live, if you type your comments, I'll read a few of them off in a moment. Let's see. I think I'm going to put a cash tan in and just take it way down so that we get that nice undergrowth layer. I like that. I think I'll leave that open. I kind of like that as a viewing window. But I also, yeah, this, see now even something as simple as this becomes its own interesting scene. Ah, this is screaming to have a person though. I need a worker. I mean, I need more people in general, but let's just get somebody there because that just really feels like it needs a person. Somebody watching the cars come in as he's smoking his pipe. Maybe he's the manager of the grain elevator or something. We'll go with that. We're going to do this is just grass, and this is going to be a little interesting to fit because we're trying to keep it within this line here. I think we could do that. Actually, this might be the place to use some of those JVC track sides. I think they're JVC RMM, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, that'll be thin enough. That's what I'm looking for. So if that's our outer limit, and then we just build up. I like it too because it's a lighter shade. I don't want it to be anything too heavy. Now the key is going to be to transition out of it. I think what we'll do is we'll probably put some more bushes in there, and that'll be the outer segue portion. I like that. I think I might put a couple of the lighter colored bushes in there just to give a little bit of variety, but overall, like just a little bit so there's a bit of texture. Not texture as in ground texture, because obviously we have that, but more just that feeling that you could touch it, especially when it's digital, because obviously with the physical layout you could touch it. No brainer. Yeah. And look at that. Boom. We've blocked off the logging camp visually. So now, we'll just get the bushes here and then we'll take stock of what we've got, looking around the layout as a whole, and then we'll get into the fun of we'll put the fascia and the floors down. But yeah, this is a good transition shape. So we've got these, and then we're gonna vary them as well. So quests that are in the 60s. It's a bit bright green, but nah, it doesn't work with that color. Always an interesting game to sort of match the shades and go, okay, what is actually going to mix color-wise here? But I like this. Again, this is where I feel so thankful that I could just plunk and go. Just, okay, I copy, paste. Yes, happy little trees, exactly. Let me have a look at some of what you... I can't... Okay. John says, yes, I like the idea of doing the smaller layouts on the live streams. C. Jane says Northlands. Yeah, Northlands. FYI, for those who are unfamiliar, Northlands is a layout in New Jersey that has something like 7 miles of HO scale track, and that's not 7 scale miles, that's 7 real miles. I mean, honestly, I want to see it. It looks cool, but, you know, aside from the fact that I know you're joking, I also feel like I'm an ops guy, and every time I see videos from Northlands, it's just like an F unit with 2 cars running around in a loop. Rudy Gardley, Tony Kester's layout. Yeah, well, I'm not sure if you're saying that jokingly or not. Tony's layout is nice. Tony's layout is super big. It's a gigantic N scale, or not N scale, nickel plate. That's why I was thinking N. A giant nickel plate layout. Tempting, but also super daunting. Dylan, smallish layouts, point of the series, create the layout shown without too much problems. Instead of thinking of smaller layouts as a poor substitute for the larger dream, how about treating them as their own self-contained work? I mean, that's very true. That's very true, Prof. And that's the way I see them. I mean, this is designed to be a self-contained work. And we'll see that self-containment in a moment. Yeah, I treat, you know, yeah, there's certainly layouts where you can take a scene out and remove it and have fun with just that, but I'm definitely a big proponent of the micro layout, or just small layouts in general. Hashtag don't hate the 4x8. So, sounds like some of you are up for varieties, some of you are thinking smaller. We'll keep doing the smaller builds for a while, at the very least, because I've got 3 already in my mind that'll be good projects. The next one, it's another one I'm looking forward to. It's one that has not been realized in real life. The person who was building it started to build it and then moved, and so didn't complete it. So that's gonna be fun. Okay. Oh, crossbucks. Right. Okay. So I do want to get into scenes, but let's do some crossbucks. Just because I probably will end up replacing these later, but just so we have something in here that we can appreciate. We'll do this as a 2-track. That one's got wording on the back. Old crossbuck version 3. Ooh. I mean, it's a cool design, but it's too distinct. Now that one I like. We're gonna go this one. What I might end up doing for the final version is putting a lights version, lights, but, you know, I don't think this is a kind of route that has a lit crossbuck. I think this is where we've got the worn, weather-beaten ones. Okay, that'll just satisfy that. Alright, so again, we might do some... let's add some cars. Let's add some 1950s cars. So 1950s, which means we're going to unlock the 1950s layer. Just so we have something in the parking lot. So... these are super nice models. My only complaint, they're almost too nice. But, you know, the cars that are here, and, you know, if they're nice, they're nice. We'll lower the height on that a wee bit. Get them all to look about right. And yeah, technically this would also be 1970s, so we'll switch that to the 1970s layer. And that disappeared because we have the 1970s layer invisible. Do we have logging layout fans in here today? Narrow gauge? Well, hopefully they like logging because this adds a significant portion of this. But I know what you mean, Rico. As far as older era logging. And I do want to do some ON30 plans and the like. That's definitely in the cards. Okay, we're going to leave it at that for now because otherwise it could get way down that rabbit hole. And I really want to make sure we get the the basics of this finished tonight. Again, I'll probably play with it later, but here's what we're looking at. And honestly, I'm really happy with what we're looking at. Like, especially if we take the fact that on this side 2 hours ago we had nothing, and now we've got this snow shed, we've got these wonderful corner pocket scenes, and we've got this really cool grown up. We've got Michael the Magic Moose, as of course we should, and we've got this era interchangeable log facility. I'm happy with that. I'm very happy with that. Okay, so this is where the magic happens. First, we should save this, because saving is a good thing to do, and I don't do it enough. So what we need to do first and foremost is... well, we have a choice. We can either do the dig holes, or we could do the fascia. Let's start with the dig holes. Dig holes are what we use to make all this grid work disappear. That, and it, yes, it is a magic trick, essentially. So we get the biggest size we can, and then we have to figure out the right place to place it. Unlocking the dig hole layer. Now, this is a little trickier on layouts with, is that the, nope, that's not the edge we're going with. It's a bit trickier to do this on layouts that have a lot of complex geometry, but today's build, this is going to be super easy. So the dig hole just digs a hole. I mean, it is basically what it sounds like. It makes this grid work see-through. So you could see underneath the layout because now it is see-through. And we're going to do, I think, 3. It does, only downside, it does sometimes mess with scenery height. So we'll see how it does on these edges. But I think this is going to be okay. But yep, that is the magic of the business. Now this part gets pretty repetitive, so I don't know if we'll get the whole way around. Well, we'll get the whole way around. I'm not going to try to do the entirety of... Oh, we'll need to move that. This whole lot, because that's just over and over and over. But we'll get enough of the area around this so that you have enough of a sense of what we're going towards. Obviously, the final version will remove all of it, but just enough that we can get the kind of area immediately surrounding it to look properly train layout-esque. And now we have the floating train layout. Ooh. Diggy diggy hole. Yes, exactly. Let's do another round of diggy diggy hole, and then we'll see if that's enough. Just enough to give you a sense of what we're going towards here. So I'm counting by... So this is 4x8, which is the largest shape of dig hole that I can get. I'd welcome somebody to make a nice 16x16 or something really big like that, because then it'd make this part less time consuming. But again, we're not going to do the whole thing. Just enough that we could get the immediate grid work close to the layout removed. So good enough that when we're within proximity of it, it's going to look all right. And actually what we can do to kind of help negate the significance of the grid as well is we can just do a massive texture replacement. So we go to bulk, and this is great too if, say, you didn't like my choice of a tree or something along those lines. it's possible to replace one type of asset with another. In this case, we're going to do the grid texture, and we're going to replace it with just a simple black texture. Nothing fancy, just if we go to here, and that'll make it a little less obvious. So we can still see it, but now it's not going to demand our attention in the way the grid would. And that's our dig hole, or at least the beginnings of it. I do want to run for a little bit, so I'm going to try to... That's why I'm saving some of that stuff. Fascia. This is going to be basically just a game of connect the dots. So we start off at one edge, and we just basically let it... When you're placing a spline object like this, its natural state is to follow the terrain around it. Usually, obviously, there are exceptions to that. So we're going to have to refine it a little bit when it comes to things like this hill, because it's not going to naturally snap to that. But we'll get the initial walls of it set up. So these are the main 4 walls going from corner to corner. And then we'll apply the corners in a moment. Trying to get them lined up vertically with where they're supposed to end up. Okay. Now we're going to turn on our straighten tool, which means that these 4 pieces have to be straight, which is going to enable us to place curves. Oh, that one didn't get straightened for some reason. And we're going to add the corners here. And this might be the type of the thing in a future stream I might just gloss over this or save it for another time. But I figure since this is the first time building a route with you guys, you might find it interesting to see how we actually turn this into a train layout from the grid work that it was. So there we have it. There's our basic box. Obviously, as you can tell, we have these gaps where we've got hills. And so what we do for that is we add spline points. And it's kind of a guesstimation game as far as where to put them, but the basic idea is just this gives us the ability to raise specific points. Oh, we don't want to raise the grass. Oh, I thought did I add a no, I guess it... Oh, I added a spline point for the grass. That's why I did that. Okay. We're going to add one for here. So it's an interesting trick as far as getting it to align to the terrain, and it's just basically trial and error to get it to fit right. Because obviously down here, and also we have to clean up the trees that are falling all over the place. Dig holes have a tendency to do that. I do not know why. It's the game. It's one of those things you learn to work with, and you just kind of figure out, okay, oh, this is a bush, right? So you just learn to work with it and go, okay, how do I work around this as an issue? Looks like we have one more bush sticking out. So this is where that invisible... Yeah, so now we can see, oh, here's all those bushes. They're all hiding from me at the moment. They all kind of buried themselves underground. Naughty bushes. That was not the thing to do. But now they reappear. And also, because of the way the dig holes work, it has now pushed the grass underneath, which... Or no, I don't think that's the dig hole. I think that's because I... No, that's not an end vertex. I'll play with that more at a later point. It's good enough to illustrate the concept I'm going for, which is here is how you make your clean edges. It is a bit of work. I wish it was much more automatic than it is. It's the type of thing you just, as a train Z roof builder, you learn to work with it. But I do feel like it adds that nice bit of polish where, yeah, I could have just made the edges black and left it at that. But I do think there is something to be said for actually having the edges in place. This road is going to need to go straight into the fascia. And then we'll raise it up so that it looks decent there. Looks like there's some texture fighting, so we'll add a little bit of dirt here. So, but you see, now we have the floating layout of magic with fascia. Let's see how much more we've got. Yeah, I think I'm mainly going to focus on this side. I'm not going to worry about everything tonight because, again, this part can be just a bit repetitive and it's not really applicable at all to model railroading, but it gives you a sense of how I do what I do. And we're going to raise this up to hide that transition there. And clear the corner there. But now that's a clean edge. I'm much happier with that. We'll lower this down because then that can get right to the height that we're looking for as far as just over the lip. It just adds that little bit of polish. Oh, this is the lake spline, which is hanging out. So now we could see how much it's hanging out by. We could just take that in on both sides. That's the rock spline. That's probably grass. Now comes the question of which... Oh, there it is. Okay. And there we go. And so we still have this magical floating corner, but I'm not going to worry about that right now because I want to make sure we get time to run. So, next up, we go to supports. Support for our program comes from viewers like you. That was actually unintentional, but that was a really good tie-in, so yes. For those of you supporting on Patreon, I really appreciate it. But honestly, even if you're unable to do so, just watching the show, the number one thing y'all could do in general, just share this to whatever model railroading groups you're part of. If you think they wouldn't be interested in the whole stream, just share the channel or share the Murky Omen episode. But just spreading the word about this, getting, helping me to get a sense of feedback on what you'd like to see the show do, I appreciate that. All right, from random tie-in, we go back to the supports. And for this one, I'm just going to do a very basic... where's... Oh, now I have to see if I can remember which one it is. Because there's a bunch of different... I think this is what I want. Yep, this is what I want. Okay. So you can place supports as if this was on a table. For this build, I like the idea that we're going to go for more of a kind of cabinet look. And you can actually use real cabinets if you want. Not what we're going to do today, but just even having these, this sort of wall. It's not a wall because we're gonna make a real wall in a moment, but gives you a sense of what we're going towards. All to the same height. This part is actually super easy. It's all like I just need to place this here. It's on its own separate layer. Unfortunately, Base Maps, the program that I use to import the track plans, it automatically creates those layers, so it makes it even easier to remember. Hey, I need to go in there and make sure that I've got all my different layout bits in place to make this look good. And that height, no, that's not negative 2.84. That's definitely... Nope. That's why I know it's not. I'll manually adjust it, I guess. And then just position a little bit so those joints line up nicely. Now we're getting the floating train layout of Magic, but with at least some sense that it's on a table of some kind. And there's all sorts of different assets on the download station for different types of table looks. You could do more support style things, so I think it's ESMR is the one I'm thinking of. Support, maybe. Am I going to run Steam when I'm done? Yes, and I'm going to be done shortly, so we're almost to that point. So if I wanted to do actual table, this is the kind of asset that I would use. I feel more like doing the cabinet look, especially this color looks really nice with the color palette that we're using on the design. Okay, so we've got our supports in there. Next up, our floor. And the floor is just our wood. Nope, not stairs. Gives you a sense of what you can do. So if you really wanted to go crazy and model your entire bedroom with the train layout in there, you could do that. I tend to be skimpy on the details. I feel like the layout's the focus, so I don't go crazy in adding chairs and things like that. But, oh, I know I didn't appear because I'm not in that. But, obviously, you build as you see fit. So the floor is super easy. Floor, we're just going to basically add a few panels, and then they just all get height adjusted to the same height. And going with a wood floor, because that seems nice and pretty. They don't have to line exactly. In fact, we're going to put them at slightly different elevations so that they don't do what's called Z-fighting, which is where you get this kind of ugly texture flicker effect. Oh no, what happened to the layout? Right. Okay. And we're going to adjust the height of that to... well, let's see how we do with -60, since that's what we used on the supports. Basically, it just has to look like it's going to meet. I mean, it's not the kind of thing you're going to super analyze. Yeah, that looks like it's going to meet. So we did -60.55, so now we do 0.54. And just that one itty bitty bit of difference is going to prevent Z-fighting. Oop, if I clicked on it where I didn't want it. And here. Now we've got a floor. So, the last bits are the wall and the roof. But, sure. Yeah, let's just do that. In fact, actually, it'll then allow me to cheat, because then I can put the walls in front of the dig holes, and then we aren't going to notice that as an issue. So, wall. So we're going to switch to the walls layer. And what I love about having this, again, is where having the the different layers makes all the sense in the world, because yeah, I'm gonna want to search MRR. This is where it makes all the sense in the world that you want to have layers, because if you want to represent it as a model railroad, then you want to be able to see the wall. However, if you want to use it to take more realistic photos, then you can do that, and then you can disable the walls, and then you keep the sky backdrop. So we're going to put these walls in here, which are just simple objects. They just get placed and then dragged down to approximately the right height. And so that way, we aren't even going to see those dig holes we haven't done. And I might leave it like this because honestly, a layout like... Yeah, I might leave it like this because a layout like this, you wouldn't need it to be in a giant room with tons of extra wall space around it. So there we have it. The walls are up. And last but not least is the ceiling. And then we're going to get a train underway, because I know that's the part of the show you've all been waiting for. So last thing we're going to do is ceiling. And this is another... It's basically just like the floors. We're just going to take this and we're going to place a couple of strips of it at the default height elevation of 0. And yeah, they're tiles, so yes, they do technically line up in a particular way. But if you're analyzing the ceiling tiles on this layout, I have not done it correctly. Which is to say, I've probably done a pretty bad job of building the route, and we don't want that. Okay. Only thing I'm not digging is that these ceiling tiles appear to cast a shadow. So I think I'm gonna place them so you can see what it looks like, and then we're gonna take them out. But just to give you that initial sense of, hey, here's what it looks like. One of the challenges I find when building specifically model railroads in Tane is, or not Tane, TRS-19, is that certain objects cast shadow, which is great when those objects are trees and not great when it's a ceiling. But you can see the ceiling is now in place. We've got a little bit of a gap there, but there is a ceiling. So we're going to immediately untoggle that layer just so that we don't have a constant shadow. Looks like it may not have been low enough, so I'm going to do 120 as a height on those. And then we'll untoggle them. And then we'll get a train running. And there we have it. So, I'm not sure why it's still showing that little gap there. Must be not quite lined up with the... oh well. Since we're not doing it anyway, we won't worry about it too much. But that gives you a sense of all of these different elements we could do scenically. So we're going to disable the ceiling. We'll leave the walls, since otherwise I feel like... what do you think? Walls? No walls? Type in the chat. Walls or no walls? You got a few minutes before we start running. So, I've had the request. I'm hearing you guys loud and clear. You want steam? That's what we're going to do today. And I think we're already set to the 1950s version of the layout. So we're just going to remove these more modern era cars. And, of course, Canadian Pacific in the 1950s would not be complete if we didn't have this beauty on hand. The D10. This model is courtesy of Trains Forge, who've done an absolutely marvelous job at recreating it. It is such a beautiful engine. So what we are going to do is now give it a cabin, or a van, but the person who created the asset for it called it a caboose, so we are going to call it a caboose as well. At least we're going to call it a caboose long enough to get it placed here on this barge. And D10 number... we're going to go with the last one I've seen in person. Oh, wait. I have to use a different... never mind. We're not going to use that one. We're going to use this one. Comment if you know the significance of this specific D10. So we've got the D10, we've got the cab, or the van. Now we're going to add a couple of boxcars. So we are going to have this boxcar, which is going to go to our grain elevator. Actually, we'll make that 2. Or 1 or 2. Oh, I'd meant to extend the ferry capacity, but in a way that's okay because we're going to kind of go with what we have here. We'll just do that. So we've got one of these boxcars which is going to go to the grain elevator because grain was hauled in boxcars for a very long period of time, especially on CP. They were using grain up until the 70s, about the time when you see all the cylindrical Canadian hoppers. Hey, LJL Railroad. Hey, Michael. Glad you could join us. Everybody wants to see walls. Okay. Then we'll enable walls. I guess it does add to that kind of model railroading flavor. So we've got the walls in place. But the thing that's nice about them is that they're not distracting. I mean, you could make them whatever you want. You could put posters. Like, there's poster assets. So you could have posters, wall art. You could make shelves and have trains models on display on your walls. There's a lot you can do on that front. And then what we also need is some log cars. We'll get rid of this stuff because we don't need it anymore. So we need some empty log cars that we're going to be using for transporting. Oh, and I'm on the walls layer, of course. Empty logs, we're going to use about 6. Those are going to be headed to the logging camp. And we're going to have 6 here that are loaded and ready to go. Just going to place a load on them. 32 40-foot log stack. 1. And copy that to all the cars. I love how it randomizes the different sizes on each. So yeah. Is the 972 the one of Strasbourg and the one that did rail tours? You get a cookie, Nate. That is correct. Alright, so we've got our session staged. And let's have some fun. Hopefully we've been having fun. But let's have some more fun. Let's play with some trains. Here we go. I'm just going to save this because I don't think I changed anything super crucial, but it can never be too safe. Here we go. So what I'm excited about running today is last week I'd forgotten to have my rail driver plugged in, but this week I did not. And what I like using the rail driver for those who are unfamiliar with it, it's a desktop controller. I'll turn the camera so you can see it next to my empty glass. It's a desktop controller that's used for running trains. Obviously, it's fashioned after a modern diesel desktop control stand. But for DCC, we just use the throttle to go up and down. At some point, I'll probably do a full video on that because it's worth it. But just so that you have a sense if you're not familiar with it, it's great for running trains because then I don't need to have the heads-up display on and see, okay, what position is the throttle in. I love running without the heads-up display. So I can just look at the knob and I can see what position it's in. And that just makes it so much easier. Okay, so since we're within yard limits, I think what we're gonna do, can we tack on the caboose to the end of this while still having room for the cars? No, so we're gonna have to hold on to the caboose for a minute. We'll come back to that. So we're just gonna grab these other cars off the barge. Technically, when you're unloading a barge, you want to keep your weight even, so I probably shouldn't have unloaded all the cars from one side at one time. I probably should have grabbed the engine, then the 2 box cars, then the caboose. But the caboose is super light. I don't think it'd make that much of a difference. But yeah, that's another way in which, if you're running this layout and you want to keep it realistic, don't just take all the cars from one side and all the cars from the other. Alternate sides. Okay. So what we're going to need to do, first, and I suppose I could have staged cars here, but we're already running close to 10. But yeah, if we wanted to have even more operational fun, you could, of course, stage cars here, and then those are cars you would take with you back on the cart. In fact, let's just throw one in there for the heck of it, just because otherwise it feels a little empty if we don't have anything car-wise to haul back. So we're going to put... But we'll make it easy on ourselves. We've just got 2 cars. And we'll make one of them a gondola. Because I think I have a 41-foot... we have a CP gondola I can just throw in here super quickly. Well, there's the modern hoppers, but that's not exactly what I'm looking for. Just something other than a box. Oh, I know. I have a CN flat. We'll just do that. Once it commits the asset, then we can just place that in there. It was hauling machinery onto the island, or onto this island, or onto this landscape, and then it's ready to go back. Okay, now we have a little something we could do on that front. So this this front box car is the one we're going to take to the grain elevator. It's on the wrong side. This car is on the correct side. For where we want to switch it, because it's going to go to the lumber company. So I think what we want to do here, this is the fun of, okay, now how do we want to make our switching moves, and how do we want to do it most efficiently? Well, we might as well get set up on the main at least, so we'll pull into the main. And then I think what we'll end up doing is we'll pull the head end room starts to become an issue. But I think if we... I know how I want to do this. Okay. We're gonna... Yeah, I know how I want to do this. And now here's part of where we can admire the kind of the trackside view. So I find myself, when I'm trying to figure out what switching moves I'm going to make, I do a lot of hovering from the air, because I want to be able to see the tracks and see the whole space. If I'm running in circles, that's when I'll get more towards the ground. Huge fan, Titan. Huge fan of At the Rail Yard and your character from San Juan Branch Line. Oh, thanks. I'm glad that you enjoy both of those. So... press the fast forward button. Sometimes these D10s get stuck in the corners a little bit. And I thought I'd updated this tender, but I think that might have been a different model. Sorry if I gave you a headache there. So I think... Yeah, there are kind of a couple ways to do this. Early place. I think I'm gonna leave this switch, or the boxcar on the other side of the switch. And that way then I can run around and it's still on the correct side. But the... Oh, I forgot to throw the switch. It's gonna be the funky motion. But that way that car remains on the correct side. But I actually want to run around the caboose as well, because it's going to need to go on the rear end of the logging cars. Is this going to be for TRS-19 or is this for both? This route is specifically for TRS-19. There was a while I was doing both, but I've moved in the direction of doing stuff pretty exclusively for 19 at this point because I love the PBR textures. I mostly love the lighting. Sometimes I'll tweak it a bit because it can be a bit bright. I love the PBR assets, the texturing that's coming out on some of these engines. Like, if you look at this D10 here, you know, the way that the light shines off the boiler and stuff like that, it's great at those things. So that's why it's my priority right now. Okay, so I really want to see if we can get that log, if we can get the caboose on with the log cars, because then I don't have to have it in the way while I'm switching out these industries. Have I ever been to Switzerland? No. I would love to sometime. I've seen some really incredible photos of the Albula, I believe it is. I've seen it in Train Sim. I definitely, and obviously the cog railways. So yes, it's on the I want to experience that list. So hopefully if we could get the caboose just squeezed into that siding, then that log train is set to go, and then I'm just shimmying my cars around for the lumber mill and the warehouse and grain elevator. Fast forward button. I'm putting it on the wrong thing. I meant to put that on the... Well, we'll just fast forward through that. Another advantage of Train Z, the fast forward button. Which I may use less of if it weren't for the fact that I do want to make sure that, at the very least, I want to make sure we get over to the other side of the layout and we can appreciate the work that we've done there before moving on. Oh, looks like I can fit it with the caboose. Oof, it's going to be tight, but I think we can make that work. Alrighty. So now that's stage set to go. That's something else that I've learned as I've built a bunch of these track plans. You throw a caboose into the mix, one single car, and now you've got 10 new moves you have to make just to keep it in the right place. So having a caboose, and it doesn't have to be backdating to the 50s or even the 70s. You could say that you want a caboose as a shoving platform for a lawn spur or something like that, and then it's still worth having. So I hope those of you who were craving steam can switch your mind, are enjoying this. I think that's a screenshot moment right there. This is why I wanted to build this layout, and honestly, I am not disappointed. This has exactly the operating that ooh, wrong camera view. The operating potential that I was hoping for. It feels like this has a lot of replay value. Texas County, I see your request in there. Feel free to shoot me if you go to the roundhousepodcast.com. Shoot me an email. I'd be more than happy to talk projects with you there. Okay, so actually, I guess I wanted to back up a little further to catch that other boxcar, but we can hold off on that. We can grab the other two first, and then move that one into position. It'll be interesting to see if we can fit them all in at the same time once this one's in place at the elevator and grabbing the other one. And now let's throw her forward. But I feel like this is something, and here's part of the secret. If you build this track plan, you don't have to make it a logging railroad. I think that it's very easy to look at a track plan and say this is what it is, but the reality is you could adapt it to different. You could make this a whole giant city scene and an industrial switcher. You could make the both halves of it different elements of a city switching scene. A lot of flexibility creatively, but just for what it was conceived as being, I really like it. I see myself having a lot of fun with this because I think it just lends itself to you've got car variety, which is nice. You've got operations variety because you could just potentially, if you were wanting to do a shorter operation, well, let's get this guy parked first, and then we'll pull those other two boxcars out. Or the other two cars out. But if you were pressed for time, you could just switch cars on and off the barge. You could just do a load of logs and back. You could do the whole enchilada. It really lends itself to different lengths of time. I think you're pretty much limited to one train at a time, but could you try to make two train operations work? Probably. I mean, I could see throwing another engine on here, and you have it on the other side, and then occasionally it comes through the town as a way of kind of interrupting the regular flow of things. And here we go. Now let's see what kind of space we have. Oh yeah, we've got enough space to get those two cars out, but probably not enough that if we had all three, we'd be bam. So I think what we'll end up doing, given how we're looking at time, I think we'll throw these cars on the barge. I think we'll throw the boxcar in the yard. And then we'll run to the logging camp. Or maybe just do some loops, because we can go past 10, but not by much. I don't want to drag it out too long. You guys enjoying this? Please let me know if you're finding this interesting at this point. We'll grab the second car. And of course, if you wanted to make your operations more realistic as well, like here I am just grabbing car, but there's apps out there, like you could technically wait 10 seconds for your conductor to walk back and couple to the cars and so forth. I'm rushing through it, but you don't have to. There's plenty of ways to really make the whole session a fulfilling thing. Railroad guy, I'm loving this. Glad to hear that. Ooh, I'm liking this scene too. Like, and this is the kind of stuff that you don't know it until you try it. And that's what I love about experimenting in the city. I wouldn't have thought of this as a scene but I really like how it looks. And I think we have just enough room to get this switched to the plan before we run out of track. Oh, we should. So one adjustment I'm going to make right now. This is a technical thing. So in Train Z, there's sort of a default radius to how close your the switches lock out at. So if you apply a modified trigger radius, it allows you to change the switch closer to it. Ignore that if you don't care about Train's technical details. But basically the short end is now I can throw the switch properly. Ooh, I accidentally did couple that car. We'll leave it there for the moment. I mean, it looks kind of cool. It's not doing anybody any harm. Oh, except I was going to... I don't think I'm coming back to the yard. Okay, this is where we pretend to use the 5-fingered crane. Hand of God, if you prefer. Or Mouse of Nick, rather. But there we go. The car kept moving because it has momentum to it, but it will stop momentarily. And then I'll probably reset it again. But here we are. And then what we'll do is we'll just throw these cars on the barge. And we might have to stick that one in the siding just to get it out of our way. So while we're switching here, what are some of your favorite railroads? Like if we're talking, I'm doing more small layouts on the show. What kind of layout would you like to see? That's, let's say, no bigger than a 4x8 or maybe a small L-shaped. Shout out again goes to Rico for making this awesome barge slip. I love it. So we'll throw the boxcar on here. And for the sake of time, we're just going to leave the flat car there. It's pretty light. It wouldn't greatly disturb the weight. So I think we're okay in doing that. And then we put the engine and the caboose on the other track. Actually, come to think of it, I think both of these cars are empty. Oh, no, that one has loaded lumber. It'll be okay. So, the last boxcar gets thrown in the warehouse, then we take these log cars for a spin. The road, guys. Some kind of Boston and Maine road would be nice. Honey, you should mention that. There might be a Boston and Maine route that I've already finished. And not a small one. It's a medium-sized one. But I think it's one that it's Boston and Maine. It is specifically Boston and Maine. The person who built the original layout built it as Boston and Maine. And yes, that one is pretty much done. There's a couple of custom buildings that are getting custom stations that are getting done for it. Maybe one from 101 Track Plans by MR. I've been reading my copy of 101 Track Plans, or technically 102 Track Plans, religiously the past month. As I've been developing this show and as I've been developing ideas for what to do, I have. Because there's a lot of food for thought of ideas in there on all sorts of scale fronts. I confess, the smaller layouts, a lot of the smaller layout designs don't impress me, for various reasons, but I think namely because a number of them feel more random. They don't feel like they've been created with a specific operating scheme in mind. They feel either too spaghetti bowl, too many yards, too much cramming of track, or they just feel we're gonna fast forward this bit. Too spaghetti bowl or just too random. I see a plan like this was clearly created with an intentionality of how it was to be run. But some of the 101 track plans just feel like, here's a random idea. I'm not opposed to illustrating that as a concept. Maybe if you have a specific one, Squiggy, that you can recommend as like, hey, I'm really curious about this one, I could see doing that. There's a few in there that I could see doing. But I will confess, the smaller ones, I'm less a fan of for the most part. There's some really interesting bigger ones though that I'd love to explore. Ethan Park, could it be the Cheshire branch? It could be the Cheshire branch, actually. It very well could be the Cheshire branch. That is certainly a possibility. It might not be the Cheshire, but it could be the Cheshire branch. All I will say about that B&M track plan is that it's one that I built because it immediately leapt off the page to me when I read it. And I think it's one that really, it's one that I look at it and go, I could see building something like this when I have the room to construct it. So I'm curious to see how it runs. That's one that I wouldn't do it one for one, but I'd be really interested to see how it works. I know I've killed motors by not blowing for crossing, but to be fair, Rudy, it's been a pretty slow day here in Lardo. We're not doing too badly, all things concerned. I've got the bell on now. I've got the bell on. I'm not pretending that I'm doing this in the safest manner. I am totally doing this in the quickest manner possible, but you will have to forgive me. Speaking of doing it in the quickest manner, we are now going to fast forward the engine to get it down to the other end of the yard. Hope you guys don't mind the fast forwarding. As I say, there will be a full edited piece on this layout once it's done, once I've had a chance to just tinker with it to my liking. There's going to be a full edited piece and you'll be able to properly experience it. But hopefully you're getting a good feel of what it's like to run this. You know, and as an N scale layout, like I think if we look at it like this, you get a good feel of what this would actually look like in N scale at about this distance and about this height. And I mean, it's small, but I think that it's a nice layout. This is one where if I were an N scaler, I'd probably be building this. I'm not, and I don't know that I ever could be convinced. So I've got two of these Rapidos, these D10s on order from Rapido. So it does beg the question, well, could you do a 6x12? And just grow it by a factor 2. Yeah, but these are 18-inch radius curves, and the Rapidos need 22. And once you get into that wide of a space, then you're getting into, like, can you reach into it? I feel like if I were to do this, I don't know, it might turn into an around the room at that point. It's a possibility. But I've certainly learned a lot through doing it. All right, let's enjoy the Gerard side of what we've got going on here. Oh, I think I've lost. Why am I not able to? I'm trying to blow the whistle, and for some reason I'm unable to. Oh, okay. Whatever that was about. Here we go. Except I want to change directions so that I can have the rear headlight. Interesting. Alright, we'll get ourselves a nice view for the part in town. I don't need to do a drug test. I fully admit that I am rushing through things. I think reckless driving is my worst offense here. Denver and South Park plan. I'd have to take a look at that. I have some Colorado narrow gauge stuff in mind. So we'll see what ends up happening on that particular front. I mean, I'm pretty happy with that as a scene, honestly. Now let's make sure I actually get my switches lined right for when I come back into town. Oh, there we go. As I block my view with a tree. Yes, the whistle on the D10 is from K&L Trains G2. But they're both CP whistles. I love the rock wall. I think the rock wall came out great. I like the snow shed. I'm happy with that. And then we turn over here and now we can appreciate the logging, the log loading facility. So if we go back to the other side to kind of have a bird's eye view of that. Again, trying to imagine that this is N scale, that your trains are about yay big. But I don't think that's a detriment. I think that to get... I mean, would this work at HO? Yeah, I think it would. I think you could get away with doing it as a 6x12. Yes, 6x12. But I think that for a 3x6, this is a really good amount of operation while maintaining continuous running. And then here's that mountain scene. Obviously, yeah, we're gonna have to fix that before release, but here's that kind of valley scene we were talking about earlier, contained in its own right. And then let's have a look at the kind of wide view of this lake. I mean, that's nice. We'll lower the camera a little bit. Like, that is a good scene. And the advantage with water is that now you that's one scenery technique that covers a significant portion of your layout that ends up giving you a really nice result and alludes to more. I mean, obviously this is a bigger lake, but we're seeing just the edge of it, just the point that we want. And you could put boats in there and stuff like that. I might put a fishing boat or something like that in when it comes to the final detailing. And these two scenes really are separate pieces. I mean, even if you're viewing it from out back, they really, just that little hill with that tree barrier is making those feel like two distinct sections. Let's take more of a... Let's try the side view this time as it comes around. And then I think we'll switch cars. I won't be able to finish this session tonight because gotta wrap it in. But we'll switch the cars so we can at least appreciate the runaround. Trees for viewing window. Alright, let's go back over to here and we're gonna get ourselves situated. How do we want to do this? Actually, I think I want to pull in on the other side so that we're pulling the loads off, tacking the caboose on, and shoving the empties. Yep, we'll do it that way. Oh. That was the culprit of pressing the fast forward button. Say hello, Alco. As I told you last week, Alco, the newest addition to our family, he's a good cat, but he does like to walk between my lap and my desk, which is intersected by my keyboard. Okay, now we've got the switch thrown. We'll go under Michael the Magic Moose as we pull into this spur. This should be a good scene to take in. We'll fast forward it. Oh. I might put some more grass just along this front edge right here because I'm really liking how this looks, but it just feels like it stops. So it needs to continue along the edge. Now let's make sure we've got a good, we're clear on the front end. Looks like we are. Gonna disconnect that. Oh, and talk about attention to detail. I don't know if you guys saw that. We'll recouple the cars for the moment. We'll make sure we're attached to the engine so that we can back it out properly. Look at the brake hose here as I disconnect. Brake hose disconnected. Trainsforge did some amazing work. I really admire their attention to detail with their models. So, curiosity, hold time while we do this final switching maneuver. You've seen both the 1970s version with the big crane, as well as the 1950s version of our logging facility. If you were building this layout, or when you download this and you're playing with it, which is your preferred era, 1950s or 1970s? Cast your vote in the live stream. And then we'll change this. So we're gonna shortcut this, which is to say I'm gonna hook up to the logging cars, hook up to the caboose. We'll do a few victory laps, call it a day. This is a... have I told you guys how much I love Canadian Pacific yet? This is just such a great view right here. If you want, I hope somebody someday builds this layout. I don't care if it's 70s or 50s. I'd love to see somebody build this layout. Maybe I'll be crazy enough to do it myself, but I think I had high hopes for this. I was really hoping that it would be as interesting as it looked, and I am not disappointed. I think that it really... I think this is the type of... It's simple. You could probably build it in a year. I mean, depending on, obviously, your work-life balance, all that stuff. But assuming... Let's assume you have, like, a Saturday or a Sunday to yourself once a week. I think you could build this in a year. Maybe 2 if you need time to build the structures and so forth. Oh dear, why did I derail? Probably I ran out of track or I came too close to the... must have hit the bumper. Well, we are going to ignore that, which is to say we're just going to magically re-rail all this equipment. I'm going to have to... I can't really expand it beyond what it is. Might just be a matter of having the log cars a bit too close to the edge. Okay. Here we are once again. And honestly, what would be nifty about this, depending on how you... I have to select the engine. Depending on how you model and so forth, I mean, you could set it up so that your log cars, you can just take the loads on and off rather than having to restage your cars every time you want to cycle them. Because if you just had log cars and you can just place the clump of logs on your car, and you're basically, you take the log dump cars and just plunk them onto your loads, and then you're already set to go. You don't have to move the cars or anything. Oh, wait. That's a good shot of Michael. We gotta get a good screenshot of Michael. That just... Yep. Screenshot moment. I just have to adjust it, and we get rid of the... Yeah. Okay, we got Michael the Magic Moose in a screenshot. And if, honestly, if you're watching this years later and you've built this layout, or considering it, let me know. I think this is genuinely an interesting one. And you wouldn't have to do it as CP, you wouldn't have to do it as barge operations. I think it really lends itself to a good time, to a good amount of operations that you could fit in, again, just a 3x6 space. I don't care where you're living. I mean, unless you're, like, living in, you know, maybe if you're in a studio, maybe you can't fit that much. Maybe you really do have to do the 1x4 micro. But a 3x6 is not a huge space commitment. D10 steps, so we're gonna fast forwards. But see, this is part of why I've enjoyed building this, is now, when I want to have fun with it, I can play with it. And you'll be able to as well, once this is on the download station. Didn't quite make the hitch. And there we go. But yeah, once it's on the download station, you'll be able to play with it. So if I can't bring myself to switch to N scale or do this specific plan, I could still enjoy it in the context of the sim, and I think that's every bit as good. A few victory laps, and then we're going to call it a night. Okay, for those of you who are complaining about my lack of whistling at crossings, we'll get staged at the other end of town, and I promise I will whistle for this crossing for you. Do a quick fly through the yard while we make our way there. And we'll fast forward a little bit to get caught up. I'm happy with that. And hopefully you guys are too. Hopefully you feel like after watching this under construction for about, especially those of you who tuned in last week to see its initial construction, you're really enjoying. You feel like we came to a pretty cool result. I'm really happy with how this turned out. I think there's so much scenic potential with what you could do with it, whether you remain true to the plan or whether you adapt it. Now let's do something kind of fun. Let's go for a ride in the caboose. For a lap. The GoPro view. I've seen, for HO scale at least, I don't know if anybody's done this, and somebody made a car where you can put your cell phone on it and it has a little mirror, so you can sit the cell phone sideways but the camera points out to the front. I'd like to get my hands on one of those. I think that'd be fun. For getting that first person perspective. Oh, better get the whistle for this crossing. Again, the obviously views you wouldn't have in the real model railroading world of things, but things we can enjoy in the sim. Help to make it fun since we can't actually touch it. This helps to bring it to life in a different way. That lake's the scene coming up at the lake is going to be pretty nice, I think. A little bit of track I'm going to have to smooth out there, but nothing too substantial. Oh, yeah. And then we'll hop over to the other side or float over. Oh, yeah. There we go. Alright, we'll take one final look at what we got going on here. So, this is Gerard. This is the log loading side, which obviously affords you a really nice scenic view. I think that to have an area of the layout that allows you to run through multiple times, that doesn't have too many distinct locations, so you could, if you want to extend your operating by just running in circles for 6 times or so before you actually do your work to get the feeling that you run a distance, this is a nice blank scene for that. And then on the other side here, we've got the village of Lardo, which I think has just the right amount of town to make it feel like it's incorporated, the right amount of industry to make it feel like it's busy. This barge operation, the log unloader, so you could actually have a commodity that's traveling to and from a location within the world of the layout. You've got the barge unloader, so you can bring in all sorts of commodities in. So I think that this one, as a track plan, I give it my seal of approval. Of course, I'll be giving it my formal seal of approval in the context of the episode of what makes this layout great when I feature it, which we'll see when that occurs. Within the next few months, probably, I would imagine I'll be doing a spot on this layout. But hopefully you've enjoyed watching the process. Hopefully you've learned something that you could apply to your own model railroading or your own train simming. Especially model railroading. If this is helpful to you, if you're a model railroading and you're getting ideas from this and sort of seeing what it's like to pre-visualize an idea in the context of a sim before you're actually casting the plaster and before you're actually cutting the bench work, let me know. I really appreciate your feedback, especially if I'm helping you in a specific way. And if you'd like me to do something that might more specifically help what you're looking for, that would make for good video content, let me know. Nick Ozerak at theroundhousepodcast.com is my email address, or you could just go to theroundhousepodcast.com and there's an email form there. I'm still working on getting the website set up for this series. Maybe next week it'll be up. Probably be a few weeks before it's up and running, but probably the next live stream I'll have it up and running, and I'll be able to share it to you there. Thank you guys for tuning in. I hope you've had fun watching the construction of the Kootenay Lake Navigation Company. And I look forward to seeing you again. Next week will be the Lake Erie Franklin Clarion will be for release. And then the week after that, we'll be starting our next layout construction. Stay tuned, and thank you, and have a good night.